I found my daughter at the bottom of a ravine, broken, bleeding, and drowning in the mud while the rain tried to wash her away. She grabbed my collar with a hand that was turning blue and whispered the words that would burn down an entire dynasty. It was my mother-in-law. She stood at the edge. She said my blood was too dirty to mix with theirs. She watched me fall. That was the moment the Sterling family ceased to be high society royalty and became my prey. They think I am just Lucius Blackwood, a retired old man driving a rusted truck. They do not know I secretly own the bank that holds the mortgage on their mansion. And I am about to call in the debt. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives brick by brick, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I did not knock on the front gate of the Sterling estate. I shifted my 1998 Ford F-150 into low gear and drove it straight through the wrought iron fence. Metal screeched and snapped, a sound swallowed instantly by the roaring thunder overhead. I did not care about the damage. I did not care about the alarm that surely started ringing inside the massive colonial mansion sitting at the top of the hill. My only focus was the blinking blue dot on my phone screen. It was the GPS signal from my daughter Zoe's phone, and it had not moved in 4 hours. The rain in Atlanta that night was not just a storm, it was a deluge. It hammered against the windshield, turning the world into a blur of gray and black. The wipers fought a losing battle as I steered the truck off the paved driveway and onto the manicured lawn. I drove over their prize-winning rose bushes. I tore through the hedges Victoria Sterling was so proud of. The tires spun in the mud, kicking up clumps of earth, but I kept my foot heavy on the gas. I drove until the trees became too thick, until the headlights cut into the dense, dark woods that bordered the property. I killed the engine and jumped out. The wind hit me like a physical blow. I am 69 years old. My knees ache when it rains, and my back is not what it was when I was pouring concrete foundations for the city's highways 30 years ago. But tonight I felt nothing. No pain, only a cold, sharp terror that settled in my chest. I turned on my heavy-duty flashlight and plunged into the undergrowth. Zoe. I screamed her name, but the wind tore it from my lips. I checked the phone again. The dot was right here, right in front of me. But all I saw was a steep drop-off, a ravine that cut through the back of the property like a scar. I moved to the edge, the mud slippery under my work boots. I shone the light down. The beam cut through the rain, illuminating wet rocks, tangled roots, and darkness. Then I saw it. A single white sneaker caught on a tree root about 10 feet down. It was Zoe's. I knew it was hers because I had bought them for her birthday last week. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked up toward the mansion. It sat on the hill, glowing with warm golden light. I could see silhouettes moving in the windows. They were likely having dinner, maybe drinking tea. It had been 4 hours since Zoe went missing. Her husband Garrett had not called me. Victoria had not called the police. They were inside, warm and dry, while my daughter was somewhere in this black abyss. I did not hesitate. I grabbed a thick branch to steady myself and began to slide down the embankment. The mud coated my clothes instantly. Briars tore at my jacket and scratched my face, but I kept moving. I slid, scrambled, and fell, tumbling the last few feet until I hit the rocky bottom of the ravine. The water here was rising. A small creek had turned into a rushing torrent. Zoe! I shouted again, sweeping the flashlight frantically. Then I saw a splash of color against the gray rocks, a yellow raincoat. I scrambled over the wet stones, my breath coming in ragged gasps. She was lying half in the water, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the harsh beam of my light. Her eyes were closed. No. God, no. I dropped to my knees in the freezing water. I put my hand on her neck. Her skin was like ice. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then a faint, thready pulse fluttered against my fingertips. She was alive. Barely. Zoe, baby, daddy's here. I whispered, ripping off my jacket to cover her. I tried to shield her face from the rain. Her eyelids fluttered. They opened just a crack, revealing eyes that were glazed with pain and shock. She tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. Don't talk, baby. I'm getting you out of here. I told her, my hands moving over her body to check for injuries. I have spent a lifetime on construction sites. I have seen men fall from scaffolding. I know what broken bodies look like. Her left leg was bent wrong, clearly fractured. There was a gash on her forehead that was bleeding sluggishly, diluted by the rain. But what scared me most was the way she was breathing, shallow, wet rasps. She gripped my shirt. Her hand was weak, trembling, but she held on with desperate strength. She pulled me closer. I leaned my ear down to her lips. It was her, she wheezed. The sound was wet. Who, I asked, smoothing the wet hair from her forehead. Victoria, Zoe whispered. Each word cost her something. We were walking. She stopped at the edge. She looked at me. She said my blood was dirty. She said the baby would be a stain. My entire world stopped spinning. The rain, the cold, the darkness, it all faded into a red haze. Baby Zoe was pregnant. She hadn't told me yet, and Victoria knew. She stepped back. Zoe gasped, tears mixing with the rain on her face. She watched me fall, Dad. She just stood there and watched. A primal roar built up in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Rage would not save her. Action would. I looked at my daughter, broken by the people she had tried so hard to please, the people she had married into. They hadn't just neglected to look for her. This was an execution. I need you to stay with me, Zoe. Listen to my voice. I took a multi-tool from my belt. I cut 2 straight branches from a nearby sapling. I used my belt and the sleeves of my shirt to bind her broken leg, stabilizing it as best as I could. She screamed when I moved her, a raw animal sound that tore through my soul, but then she passed out from the pain. That was better. It would make the climb easier. I lifted her. She was light, too light. I cradled her against my chest, her head resting on my shoulder, just like when she was a toddler and had fallen asleep watching TV. But now she smelled of mud and blood and fear. The climb up was a nightmare. I dug my boots into the mud, using every ounce of strength I had left in my old muscles. I slipped. I fell to one knee. I shielded her body with mine every time we slid back. I gritted my teeth until they felt like they would crack. I am not losing her. Not tonight. Not to them. It took me 20 minutes to drag us both out of that hell. When I finally crested the edge of the lawn, I collapsed for a moment, gasping for air, the rain pounding on my back. I looked up at the mansion again. The lights were still on. No one had come out. No one was searching. Garrett's car was in the driveway. He was home. He knew she was gone, and he was doing nothing. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I forced them to hold my weight. I carried Zoe to my truck. I laid her carefully across the back seat, wrapping her in the emergency wool blankets I always kept in the toolbox. I cranked the heat up to the maximum. I stood by the driver's door for a second, looking at the house. The urge to walk up there, kick down the door, and tear them apart with my bare hands was overwhelming. I wanted to see the fear in Victoria's eyes. I wanted to hear Garrett beg, but that is what a foolish man would do. That is what a man with nothing to lose would do. I am not that man. I am Lucius Blackwood, and I have resources they cannot even imagine. I climbed into the driver's seat. My hands were covered in mud and my daughter's blood. I took out my phone. My fingers left red smears on the screen as I typed a message to my brother Cyrus. Cyrus was military intelligence for 20 years. He knows how to bury things, and he knows how to dig them up. The text was short. 3 words. Activate grandfather protocol. I threw the phone on the seat and slammed the truck into gear. I did not drive toward the nearest public hospital. That is where they would look for us. That is where Garrett would come with his fake tears and his mother's lawyers to silence Zoe. No. I drove toward the private airfield 30 miles south, where my old friend Dr. Aris runs a trauma clinic for people who can afford discretion and excellence. As I sped down the winding road, leaving the Sterling estate behind in the rain, I made a silent vow. Victoria Sterling thought she had disposed of a problem tonight. She thought she had discarded broken trash in the woods. But she had made a fatal miscalculation. She didn't know that the roots of the Blackwood family ran deeper than her foundations. She didn't know that the land her mansion stood on used to belong to my grandfather before her family stole it. And she definitely didn't know that I had spent the last 40 years buying back every debt, every loan, and every mistake her family had ever made. I looked in the rearview mirror at my unconscious daughter. "Hold on, baby," I whispered. "We are going to war." I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The engine roared, a sound of pure, unbridled aggression cutting through the storm. The hunt had begun. The automatic doors of the private trauma clinic slid open with a soft hiss that sounded like a snake warning its prey. I was standing in the middle of the waiting room. My boots were leaving cakes of mud on the pristine marble floor. My shirt was stiff with dried blood, my daughter's blood. I looked like a homeless man who had wandered into a palace. The receptionist had already tried to ask me to leave twice, but one look from my eyes had silenced her. She was currently on the phone, likely calling security. I did not care. I was a statue of rage carved out of black granite. I was waiting. Then he arrived. Garrett Sterling burst through the doors. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and designer jeans that cost more than my truck. His hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour. He looked like a man who had been interrupted during a pleasant evening of brandy and cigars, not a husband whose wife had just been pulled out of a ravine. He spotted me instantly. He did not run to the desk to ask the doctors if his wife was alive. He did not ask if the baby was safe. He marched straight toward me, his face twisted in a mask of annoyance rather than fear. "Where is she?" Garrett demanded. He stopped 3 feet away from me, wrinkling his nose at the smell of swamp water and old sweat radiating from my clothes. "She is with the doctors," I said. My voice was a low rumble like a distant earthquake. Garrett ran a hand through his hair. He looked around the empty waiting room, checking to see if anyone important was watching. Then he leaned in close, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "Did she say anything?" The question hung in the air between us. It was not a question of concern. It was an interrogation. He did not ask if she was in pain. He did not ask if she was breathing. He asked if she had spoken. He needed to know if his secret was still safe. I looked down at him. I am 6'4". I spent 40 years lifting steel beams and pouring concrete. Garrett is a man who has never lifted anything heavier than a golf club. He shrank back slightly under my gaze, but his arrogance held him in place. She was unconscious. I lied. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to think he still had control. A comfortable enemy makes mistakes. Garrett let out a breath he had been holding. His shoulders dropped. The tension left his face, replaced instantly by the sneering superiority he had always shown me. "Good. She needs rest." She was probably hysterical. You know how Zoe gets. She imagines things. He tried to step around me toward the double doors leading to the patient ward. I took 1 step to the side, blocking his path. I did not touch him. I simply placed my body where he wanted to be. "Move out of my way, Lucius." Garrett snapped. "I am her husband. I have medical proxy." "You are nothing," I said. "You were eating dinner while she was dying in the mud. You do not step foot in that room." Garrett laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of disbelief. He looked at me with pure disgust. "Listen to me, old man. You are trespassing. You are causing a scene in a private medical facility. Look at you. You are filthy. You are scaring the staff. If you do not step aside right now, I will call security and have you thrown out into the street where you belong. Do not test me. I am a Sterling. We own this town. You are just the gardener's father." I stood my ground. I did not blink. I did not breathe. I was imagining my hands around his throat. I was imagining how easy it would be to snap his neck right here in this lobby. But Cyrus, my brother, had taught me patience. Violence is a tool, not a reaction. If I hurt him now, I would go to jail and Zoe would be left defenseless. "Let us see who security removes," I said calmly. Garrett turned to the receptionist. "Call them. Get this man out of here." Before the receptionist could reach for the phone, the head nurse walked into the lobby. She was a stern woman with gray hair and a clipboard. She looked at the mud on the floor. She looked at me. She looked at Garrett. "Gentlemen, this is a hospital. Lower your voices," she said. Garrett put on his best charming smile, the smile he used to borrow money he never paid back. "I apologize, nurse. I am Garrett Sterling. My wife Zoe was just brought in. This man is her father, but he is clearly distressed and confused. I need to see my wife." The nurse looked at her clipboard. "Mrs. Sterling is currently being stabilized. Dr. Aris is with her. However, we need to discuss admission. This is a private trauma center. We do not accept standard insurance. We require a deposit or a verified payment method on file before we can move her to surgery." Garrett's smile faltered. I saw his eyes dart to the side. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was broke. His credit cards were maxed out. His inheritance was gone. He could not pay for a pack of gum, let alone emergency surgery in a place like this. "Of course," Garrett said, clearing his throat. "But surely we can sort that out later. The Sterlings have excellent credit in this city." The nurse did not smile. "Policy is policy, Mr. Sterling. The initial deposit for trauma intake is $5,000. The nightly rate for the ICU is another $5,000. Garrett turned to me. His eyes were full of malice. He saw an opportunity. "You hear that, Lucius? $5,000 a night. This place is ridiculous. You brought her to the wrong place. You probably panicked. Look, you cannot afford this. You could sell that piece of junk truck you drove here in and you would not cover the first hour." He turned back to the nurse, his voice taking on a tone of command. "We need to transfer her. Call an ambulance." We are moving her to the County General Hospital. It is perfectly adequate, and it is covered by her basic insurance. He was trying to move her to a public hospital, a place that was understaffed, a place where things got lost, a place where a husband could easily slip into a room unnoticed and finish what he started on the cliff. He wanted to move her to save money he did not have and to kill her cheaply. She is not going anywhere, I said. Garrett spun around, pointing a finger in my face. You do not have a say in this. You are broke. You live in a shack. Do you have $5,000 in your pocket right now? No. I did not think so. She is my wife, and I am making the financial decisions. We are moving her. Now. The nurse looked uncomfortable. She looked at me with pity. She saw an old black man in dirty work clothes. She saw a young, well-dressed white man who spoke with authority. She began to reach for the phone to call for a transfer. I reached into the back pocket of my muddy jeans. I pulled out a leather wallet. It was old, worn smooth by years of use. It looked like something a laborer would carry. Garrett scoffed. What are you going to do? Offer them your Social Security check. Put it away, Lucius. Do not embarrass yourself further. I ignored him. I opened the wallet. Tucked behind a picture of Zoe when she was 5 years old was a card. It was not plastic. It was heavy. It was made of black anodized titanium. It had no numbers on the front, only a gold chip and a single word embossed in silver. Centurion. It was a card issued only to the ultra-wealthy. It was a card that had no spending limit. It was a card that came with a dedicated concierge service that could charter a jet or buy a hospital wing with a single phone call. I had earned it 30 years ago when my construction firm rebuilt the city's highway system, a contract worth $400 million. I never used it. I preferred cash. But I kept it for days like this. I walked past Garrett. I walked up to the nurse. I placed the card gently on the counter. It made a heavy, solid clink against the marble. My daughter stays here, I said. I want the best suite you have. I want 24-hour private nursing. I want Dr. Aris to lead the team personally. And I want a security detail posted at her door immediately. The nurse looked at the card. Her eyes went wide. She looked up at me and then back at the card. She recognized it. She knew what it meant. She picked it up with trembling fingers. The transformation was instantaneous. The pity vanished. The annoyance vanished. In their place was pure, unadulterated respect. Mr. Blackwood. She said, her voice dropping an octave. I apologize. I did not realize. She typed something into her computer. Her eyes widened further as she saw the account verification. Everything is in order, sir. We will move Mrs. Sterling to the presidential suite on the top floor immediately. It has a private waiting area and secure access. I will page Dr. Aris and let him know you are the guarantor. Garrett was standing with his mouth open. He looked like a fish gasping for air. He stared at the black card in the nurse's hand. He could not process what he was seeing. In his mind, I was Lucius the laborer. I was the man who fixed his deck for free because I wanted to be helpful. I was the man who drove a 20-year-old truck. The cognitive dissonance was breaking his brain. That is fake, Garrett stammered. He stole it. That card cannot be his. Check the name. He is a fraud. The nurse looked at Garrett. Her expression was now cold as ice. The card is valid, Mr. Sterling, and the name on the account matches the identification Mr. Blackwood provided. I turned to Garrett. I stepped into his personal space. I towered over him. I let the anger I had been suppressing bleed into my eyes. I let him see the monster that lived beneath the grandfatherly exterior. You thought I was poor because I do not wear my money, Garrett. You thought I was weak because I do not raise my voice. You made the mistake of judging a book by its cover. Garrett took a step back, hitting the wall. He looked terrified. For the first time, he realized he did not know who I was. He realized he was in a cage with a lion he had mistaken for a house cat. You are not going to the presidential suite, I told him. My voice was calm, which made it more terrifying. You are not going to see Zoe. You are going to turn around, walk out those doors, and get in your car, because you do not have the clearance, the money, or the character to stand in this hallway. But she is my wife, Garrett squeaked. It was a pathetic sound. Not for long, I said. Now get out before I buy this building and have you arrested for trespassing. Garrett looked at the nurse. She was already on the phone with security, but this time her eyes were fixed on him. He realized he had lost. He realized the ground had shifted beneath his feet. He turned and fled. He walked fast, almost running, pushing through the automatic doors into the rainy night. I watched him go. I did not feel triumph. I felt cold resolve. This was just the first cut. There were many more to come. Mr. Blackwood. I turned. Dr. Eris was standing by the double doors. He was wearing surgical scrubs. His face was grim. He was an old friend, one of the few who knew about my past and my resources. He waved me over. "We need to talk, Lucius." I followed him into a private consultation room. He closed the door and locked it. He pulled up a digital X-ray on the wall monitor. It showed a spine. It showed fractures. "She is stable," Dr. Eris said. "We set the leg. The head wound is superficial. But Lucius, look at this." He pointed to the bruising pattern on her lower back visible in the photos taken during trauma assessment. "These represent impact points. But look at the angle. If she had slipped and fallen backward, the bruising would be distributed across her back and buttocks. But this is concentrated right here on the lumbar spine." He looked at me, his eyes serious. "This is the pattern of a focused impact. 2 distinct pressure points, like the heels of hands." I nodded slowly. The confirmation settled in my gut like lead. "She did not fall, Eris," I said. "No," the doctor confirmed. "Physics does not lie. Someone pushed her, Lucius, and they pushed her hard." I looked at the image of my daughter's broken bones. I thought of Garrett's face in the lobby. I thought of Victoria Sterling standing on the edge of that ravine. "Document everything." I told him, "Take pictures, write reports, keep the blood samples. I want a paper trail that is bulletproof." "You going to the police?" Eris asked. "Eris." "No," I said, staring at the X-ray. "The police chief plays golf with Victoria Sterling every Sunday. Evidence will disappear. Reports will be lost. Then what are you going to do?" "I am going to destroy them," I said. "I am going to take their money. I am going to take their house. I am going to take their name. And when they are naked and shivering in the gutter, then I will give them to the police." Eris nodded. He knew me. He knew I did not make idle threats. "Go to her. She is waking up in the suite." I walked out of the room. I walked down the silent hallway. My boots made no sound on the expensive tile. I was a ghost. I was a hunter. And the Sterling family had just become the hunted. They had pushed the wrong girl. And they had underestimated the wrong man. The game had changed. And I held all the cards. The sound of clicking heels on the hospital tile was not the sound of a concerned mother running to see her injured child. It was the rhythmic, sharp march of an army coming to conquer a territory. I sat in the uncomfortable chair outside the presidential suite. I had washed the mud from my hands in the bathroom sink, but dirt still clung to the creases of my knuckles. It was honest dirt, the kind you get from saving a life. The woman walking down the hallway had never touched honest dirt in her life. Victoria Sterling did not come alone. She never did. A queen does not carry her own sword. Flanking her was a man in a gray suit that cost more than the average American makes in a year. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the kind of glasses that are designed to make you feel stupid. I recognized him from the society pages. Mr. Vance, the Sterling family attorney, the man who made DUIs disappear and silenced mistresses with non-disclosure agreements. They were not here to visit a patient. They were here to manage a crisis. Victoria stopped 10 feet away from me. She looked at the closed door of Zoe's room, then she looked at me. Her face was a mask of cold porcelain. Not a hair was out of place. She smelled of expensive perfume and old money. She did not see a grieving father. She saw a problem. She saw a stain on her evening. She saw a gardener who had forgotten his place. "Mr. Blackwood." Vance spoke first. His voice was smooth like oil on water. "We understand there has been an unfortunate incident involving your daughter. Mrs. Sterling is here to ensure that Zoe receives the best care possible, although we were surprised to hear she was brought to this specific facility. It is quite above the usual means of her background." I did not stand up. I stayed seated, legs apart, hands resting on my knees. I looked at Victoria. "She is alive," I said. Victoria flinched. Just a tiny tightening of the muscles around her eyes. It was disappointment. She had hoped for a corpse. A corpse is easy to bury. A living witness is a complication. She sighed a long, weary sound as if I were exhausting her patience. "Of course she is alive, Lucius. Do not be dramatic. Garrett called me. He is a wreck, poor boy. He told me about her fall." She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper as if we were sharing a secret burden. "We both know Zoe has been unstable lately. The mood swings, the crying. Garrett told me she has been talking about ending it all. It is tragic, really. A history of depression is a terrible thing to hide from a husband. I suspect she threw herself off that cliff to punish my son, to frame him. It is a classic cry for attention from a woman who knows she does not belong in our world. My hands clenched into fists on my knees. The rage that surged through me was so hot, it almost blinded me. She was rewriting history while the blood was still wet on my daughter's bandages. She was painting my Zoe, the strongest woman I knew, as a suicidal, manipulative burden. She was planting the seed of the narrative right here in the hallway. Suicide, accident, mental instability. She did not jump. I said, my voice low and dangerous. She was pushed, and she told me who did it. Vance stepped between us, instantly shielding his client. Mr. Blackwood, those are serious accusations. Slanderous accusations. I would advise you to be very careful about what you say next. Trauma victims often hallucinate. They create false memories to cope with their own reckless actions. If you repeat that lie to anyone else, we will be forced to sue you for defamation. We will take your truck. We will take your little house. We will leave you with nothing but the clothes on your back. I looked at Vance. He was a small dog barking for his master. I looked past him at Victoria. She was smiling, a small, cold, triumphant smile. She thought she had won. She thought I was a scared old man who could be bullied into silence. She reached into her purse. It was an alligator skin bag that probably cost $10,000. She pulled out a checkbook. The gesture was so casual, so insulting, it took my breath away. She opened it and uncapped a gold pen. She wrote quickly, the scratching sound loud in the quiet hallway. She ripped the check out and let it flutter down onto the table next to me. It landed face up. $5,000. Here, Victoria said. This should cover the ambulance fee and gas for your trouble. I know things are tight for people like you. Take it. She leaned in, her perfume clogging my throat. There is a condition, Lucius. Vance has a document for you to sign. It is a simple statement confirming that Zoe had a history of mental illness and that this was a tragic accident caused by her own negligence. Sign it, take the money, and take her away. She looked at the door of the room again, her expression twisting into pure disgust. Zoe does not belong with us. She never did. I tried to warn Garrett. I told him that mixing breeds never ends well. That kind of dirty blood always shows itself eventually. It is weak. It is chaotic. She is not worthy of the Sterling name. She is barely worthy of the air she breathes. Take your daughter and go back to the gutter you crawled out of. Dirty blood. The words hung in the air. It was the same thing Zoe had whispered to me in the ravine. It was the motive. It was the confession. It was the hate that had pushed my pregnant daughter off a cliff. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stand up and break her. I wanted to shatter her jaw. I wanted to make her bleed. I wanted to show her what dirty blood could do. But I remembered Cyrus. I remembered the plan. Violence would put me in jail. Intelligence would put her in hell. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed the cold metal of my phone. I pressed the volume button 3 times. The recording app I had installed specifically for this moment activated. The little red light was hidden in my pocket, but I knew it was blinking. I slumped my shoulders. I let my head drop. I made my hands shake, a tremor of fear and age. I had to become what she thought I was, a defeated, broken old man. You want me to sign? I stammered, my voice cracking. Yes. Victoria said, her tone bored. Sign the paper. Take the money. Go away. I reached for the check. My hand trembled violently. I picked it up as if it were a holy relic. I looked at it with wide, greedy eyes. $5,000. To her, it was lunch money. To the character I was playing, it was a fortune. I cannot fight you, I whispered. You have all the lawyers. You have all the money. I just want my daughter to be safe. I do not want any trouble with the Sterlings. Smart man, Vance said, placing a document on the table next to me. Sign here. I pretended to read it. It was the admission of guilt. It was a lie that would destroy Zoe's reputation forever. I took the pen Vance offered. I signed. But I did not sign my name. I signed a scribble that looked like a name but was legally illegible, a meaningless mark. I handed the paper back to Vance. I clutched the check to my chest. Thank you, Mrs. Sterling, I said, forcing a tear to well up in my eye. Thank you. This money. It helps. I will take her. As soon as she can move, we will go. You will never see us again. Victoria laughed. It was a dry, soulless sound. See that you do. And Lucius, do not spend it all on liquor. Try to buy some soap. She turned on her heel. She did not look back. She walked down the hallway, her heels clicking a rhythm of absolute victory. Vance followed her, tucking the useless document into his briefcase. They got into the elevator. The doors closed. I sat there for a long moment. I waited until the digital numbers above the elevator showed they had reached the lobby. I waited until I was sure they were gone. Then I sat up. The tremor in my hands vanished instantly. My back straightened. The fear left my eyes, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I named it The Queen's Confession. I looked at the check in my hand. $5,000. It was signed with her distinctive, arrogant signature. It was not payment. It was evidence. It was proof of bribery. It was proof that she had tried to buy my silence regarding an attempted murder. I opened the manila folder I had brought with me. I placed the check inside, right next to the photos of the muddy footprints Cyrus had taken at the cliff. "You think you bought me, Victoria," I whispered to the empty hallway. "You think you bought my daughter's life for $5,000. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched her limousine pull away from the hospital entrance below. "You just sold your soul." And I got the receipt. I took out my phone and dialed a number. It rang once. "Did you get it?" Cyrus asked. "I got it," I said. She took the bait. She admitted to the motive. She insulted the bloodline. And she gave me a paper trail. "Good," Cyrus said. "I am at the bank. I found the leverage." "Burn them down," I said. I hung up. I turned back to my daughter's room. I was not Lucius the gardener anymore. I was not the poor father. I was the executioner. And the trial had just begun. The elevator doors at the end of the hallway slid open with a heavy mechanical hum. It was not a doctor. It was not a nurse. It was a man who took up almost the entire doorframe. My brother Cyrus does not walk. He patrols. He moved down the sterile hospital corridor with the silent, predatory grace of a man who spent 20 years hunting bad men in the deserts of the Middle East for the United States Army. He was wearing a dark rain slicker that dripped water onto the floor, and his eyes were scanning every corner, every exit, every shadow. He did not hug me. We are not that kind of family. We express love through protection. We express loyalty through violence. He stopped in front of me and reached into his jacket. He pulled out a thick, waterproof envelope and slapped it onto the table next to Victoria Sterling's check. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. "I beat the rain," Cyrus said. His voice was gravel grinding on concrete. I opened the envelope. Inside were 20 high-resolution photographs. Cyrus always carried a professional-grade camera in his truck. He called it gathering intelligence. I called it insurance. I spread the photos out. They were pictures of the cliff edge where my daughter had fallen. The rain had been heavy, but the trees had offered some shelter, preserving the crime scene for just long enough. The flash of the camera illuminated the mud with brutal clarity. "Look at the compression," Cyrus said, pointing a thick, scarred finger at a specific photo. I looked. It was a footprint. Not a boot, not a sneaker. It was the deep, sharp indentation of a high heel. A stiletto. The kind of shoe Victoria Sterling wore to assert dominance. The print was right at the edge of the drop. "Now look at the toe," Cyrus instructed. I squinted. The toe of the print was facing the cliff. She was standing still, Lucius. Cyrus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than a scream. If she had run for help, the weight distribution would be on the ball of the foot. The dirt would be kicked back. But look, the heel is sunk deep. She stood there. She planted her feet. And she watched. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was the forensic proof of what Zoe had whispered. Victoria didn't just push her. She watched her fall. She watched her hit the rocks. And she waited to make sure she didn't get up before she walked away. And here. Cyrus pointed to another photo. It was a smear in the mud right next to the heel print. It looked like someone had dragged a foot. "That is Garrett," Cyrus said. He was standing right next to her. He shifted his weight. He turned away. He saw it happen, Lucius. And he did nothing. He got in the car with his mother and drove home to eat dinner. I gathered the photos. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the effort it took not to put my fist through the wall. "We have them," I said. Cyrus reached into his waistband. He pulled out a black Glock 19. He checked the chamber and slid it back into his holster. It was a smooth, practiced motion. "Let us go," Cyrus said. Where? I asked. To the mansion, Cyrus said. I will take the guards. You take the house. We end this tonight. We put a bullet in the old woman and we break the boy's legs. We finish it. I looked at my brother. I saw the soldier in him. I saw the protector. But I also saw the rage that had burned in our bloodline for 3 generations. It was a seductive idea, to drive back to that house and unleash hell, to let the fire consume them. No, I said. Cyrus frowned. Cyrus. His hand stayed near his gun. They tried to kill your daughter, Lucius. They deserve to bleed. Death is too easy, I said. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Atlanta. If we kill them, they are victims. If we kill them, we go to prison. And Zoe is left alone. Grandfather Silas did not walk through hell so we could rot in a cell. Cyrus stiffened at the mention of our grandfather. It was the only authority he respected above me. Silas Blackwood was the first black man to own 500 acres of prime land in this county in 1950. He worked that land until his hands bled. He built a farm. He built a life. And then the Sterlings came. Victoria's father, a judge with a white hood in his closet, decided he wanted that land for a golf course. He used the law like a weapon. He fabricated debts. He forged deeds. And when that didn't work, he sent men with torches. Grandfather Silas lost the land. He lost the farm, but he saved the money. He moved to the city. He started mixing concrete. He taught us that if you cannot beat them with the law, you buy the law. He taught us that concrete is stronger than wood, and patience is stronger than fire. We spent 40 years building Blackwood Construction from a single mixer into the company that paved every highway in Georgia. We own the roads they drive on. We own the bridges they cross. We own the foundations of their skyscrapers. We did it quietly. We drove old trucks. We wore work boots. We let them think we were just laborers while we bought their debts. Remember what grandfather said, I told Cyrus. When the enemy thinks he is a king, you do not attack the throne. Cyrus recited the lesson we had learned at our grandfather's knee. You buy the castle. Exactly, I said. Victoria Sterling thinks she is a queen. She thinks her name protects her. She thinks she owns this town, but she is living on borrowed time and borrowed money. I turned back to Cyrus. If I kill her, she dies a martyr. If I take her money, her house, her reputation, and her freedom, she dies a nobody. I want her to wake up in a cage. I want her to know she has nothing. I want her to rot. Cyrus took a deep breath. He nodded slowly. He understood. The soldier stepped back and the strategist stepped forward. What about the sheriff? Cyrus asked. Sheriff Miller. He was at the Sterling house last week for a barbecue. I saw his car. That is why we do not call 911, I said. Miller is on their payroll. If we give him these photos, they will disappear. He will say the rain washed the scene away. He will say the photos are inconclusive. He will warn Victoria and she will cover her tracks. We cannot trust the badge. Cyrus agreed. We bypass the local police, I said. We go federal, but not yet. We need more than footprints. We need a confession. We need financial crimes. We need a motive so clear that even a corrupt sheriff cannot bury it. I pulled out my phone. I opened my secure banking app. I showed Cyrus the balance. It was a number with 8 zeros. Tonight we hunt their money, I said. I want you to wake up our contacts at the bank. I want a full audit of the Sterling estate. I want to know who they owe, how much they owe, and when it is due. Cyrus smiled. It was a cold, wolfish smile. I already ran a preliminary check while I was driving here, he said. They are bleeding Lucius. The mansion has 3 mortgages. Garrett has gambling debts in Vegas and Atlantic City. Victoria is trying to marry him off to Senator Thorne's daughter to secure a bailout. That is the motive, I said. Zoe. Zoe is in the way. Cyrus finished. She has a $2 million life insurance policy. Garrett is the beneficiary. And if she is pregnant? Victoria does not want a mixed-race heir, I said. She wants the money, and she wants a clean slate for her son. We stood there in silence, the weight of the evil we were facing settling on our shoulders. They had reduced my daughter's life to a balance sheet adjustment. They had tried to delete her like a line item. Find the debt, I ordered. Find every cent they owe, and buy it. I want to be the one knocking on their door when the bill comes due. Consider it done, Cyrus said. He turned to leave, ready to unleash his own kind of war on the financial district. But before he could take a step, a high-pitched, rhythmic beeping sound erupted from Zoe's room. It was an alarm, a medical alarm. My heart stopped. The cold resolve vanished, replaced by the hot panic of a father. I spun around and ran for the door. Cyrus was right behind me. I burst into the room. Dr. Eris was already there, shouting orders to 2 nurses. Zoe was thrashing on the bed. Her eyes were wide open, but she was not seeing us. She was seeing the fall. Her back arched off the mattress. The monitor showed her heart rate spiking to dangerous levels. "She is seizing," Dr. Eris shouted. "Get the diazepam. Hold her legs. Watch the fracture." I rushed to the side of the bed. I grabbed her hand. It was burning hot. "Zoe!" I shouted. "Zoe, Daddy is here. Stay with me." She did not hear me. She was screaming a sound of pure terror. "He is here!" she shrieked. "He is in the room. Don't let him touch me." I looked around wildly. There was no one there but the medical staff. "Who, baby? Who is here?" I asked. "Him," she screamed, pointing at the empty corner of the room. "Garrett. He has the needle. He has the needle." I looked at Dr. Eris. "She is hallucinating from the trauma," the doctor said, injecting a clear liquid into her IV line. "It is a stress reaction. We need to calm her down before she damages her spine further." Zoe's eyes rolled back in her head. Her body went limp as the drugs took hold. The beeping on the monitor slowed to a steady rhythm. I stood there breathing hard. I looked at the corner she had pointed to. It was empty. But her fear had been real. Cyrus stepped up beside me. He looked at the corner, then he looked at the window. The blinds were drawn, but there was a small gap. "Lucius," Cyrus said softly. I looked. The window was unlatched, just a fraction of an inch. It could have been the wind. It could have been a nurse leaving it open for air. Or it could have been something else. I walked to the window. We were on the ground floor. Outside was a garden. I pushed the blinds aside. There in the soft earth of the flower bed, right outside the glass, was a fresh footprint. A man's footprint, pointing toward the window, and then turning away as if someone had been watching and then fled. Cyrus saw it too. "He was here," Cyrus said. "He came to finish it." I touched the cold glass. Garrett had come back. He had tried to get in. Or maybe he had just come to watch her die just like his mother. "He is not done," I said. "Neither are we," Cyrus replied. I turned back to my daughter sleeping the drugged sleep of the victim. "He wants to play games in the dark," I said. "Fine, I will turn off the lights." I looked at Cyrus. "Stay here, guard the door. If he comes back, break his legs. I am going to catch a rat." I sat in the dark corner of the hospital room, a shadow among shadows. My brother Cyrus had just left his phone glowing with the financial autopsy of the Sterling family. The report was not just bad, it was a catastrophe. The Sterling dynasty, which looked so golden from the outside, was rotting from the inside out. They were bankrupt. Their mansion, the symbol of their power, was leveraged 3 times over. But the most damning detail was the red ink next to Garrett's name. Garrett Sterling owed $200,000 to the kind of men who break legs for a living. He had a gambling addiction that he had hidden behind his country club smile. And then I saw the motive. It was a life insurance policy taken out 6 months ago. The payout was $2 million. Garrett was the sole beneficiary. The date on the policy coincided perfectly with the week Zoe had told him she was pregnant. Victoria Sterling knew. The text messages Cyrus had intercepted were brutal. "The mongrel cannot be born," she had written. "It ruins the succession. Fix it." To them, my daughter and her unborn child were not human beings. They were liabilities. They were obstacles to a payout that would clear their debts and save their reputation. They needed Zoe dead to pay the bookies. I sat there as the hours ticked by. The hospital grew quiet. The nurses at the station down the hall stopped chatting. The lights dimmed. It was the witching hour, the time when cowards feel brave. At 3 in the morning, the door handle turned. It was slow, hesitant. A professional would have been decisive. This was the movement of a man who was fighting his own fear. The door creaked open a fraction of an inch. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across the floor. Then a figure slipped inside. It was Garrett. He was wearing a set of blue surgical scrubs that were too big for him. He must have stolen them from a supply cart to blend in. He looked pathetic. His face was pale, slick with sweat. His eyes were darting around the room, wild and terrified. He did not see me in the corner. He only saw the bed. He only saw the woman he had promised to protect. He closed the door softly. He stood there for a moment, breathing in ragged, shallow gasps. I could hear him whimpering softly to himself. He was psyching himself up. He was trying to find the courage to murder his wife. He crept toward the bed. He reached into the pocket of the oversized scrubs. His hand came out holding a syringe. It was already prepped. The liquid inside was clear. I knew immediately what it was. Potassium chloride. It is the standard method for stopping a heart during surgery. In an autopsy, it looks like cardiac arrest. It is clean. It is quiet. It is the perfect weapon for a man who does not want to get his hands dirty. He approached the IV line hanging by Zoe's head. His hands were shaking violently. The plastic tubing swayed slightly as he grabbed it. "I am sorry, Zoe," he whispered. The words were a soft hiss in the silence. "Mom is making me do it. I have no choice. The Russians are going to kill me. I need the money." He was crying. Tears were streaming down his face. He was framing his own weakness as victimhood. He was about to kill the mother of his child because he was afraid of a loan shark. He raised the needle. He aimed the tip at the injection port. I did not stand up. I exploded from the chair. I covered the distance between us in a single stride. I am 69 years old, but tonight I moved with the speed of a man half my age. My left hand clamped around his wrist like a steel vise. I squeezed. I felt the bones grind together. Garrett let out a strangled yelp. I did not let go. I twisted his arm behind his back, forcing the joint beyond its natural limit. There was a sickening, wet pop as his wrist broke. The syringe fell from his nerveless fingers. I caught it with my right hand before it hit the linoleum floor. Garrett dropped to his knees, his face contorted in agony. I shoved him hard, pinning his chest against the metal railing of the bed. I leaned down, bringing my face inches from his. "Look at me," I hissed. Garrett's eyes bulged. He saw me. He saw the gardener. He saw the man he had dismissed as a nobody. And for the first time, he saw the predator, Lucius. He gagged. "Please. It hurts." I held the syringe up in front of his eyes. The clear liquid caught the green light of the heart monitor. "Potassium," I said. "You were going to stop her heart." Garrett sobbed. He was blubbering now, snot running down his face. "They forced me. My mother. The debts. I had to. You had a choice," I said, my voice cold and hard as iron. "You chose money over your wife. You chose fear over honor." I tightened my grip on his throat, cutting off his air for a second. "I am not going to beat you, Garrett. I am not going to kill you. That would be mercy, and you do not deserve mercy." I released him. He slumped to the floor, cradling his shattered wrist against his chest. He looked up at me, waiting for the final blow. I put the syringe into my jacket pocket. "I am keeping this," I said. "This is evidence. This is attempted murder." Garrett's face went white. "What are you going to do?" he whispered. I grabbed him by the collar of the stolen scrubs and hauled him to his feet. I dragged him toward the door. "I want you to run," I told him. "I want you to go back to your mother. I want you to tell her you failed. I want you to tell her that Lucius Blackwood has the needle." I opened the door and shoved him into the hallway. "You just signed the death warrant for your entire family," I whispered into his ear. Garrett stumbled. He looked back at me one last time, his eyes filled with absolute terror. Then he ran. He sprinted down the corridor, holding his broken arm, fleeing from the monster he had awakened. I watched him go. I did not chase him. Fear spreads faster than fire. By morning, the Sterling mansion would be a house of panic, and panic makes people make mistakes. I turned back to the room. Zoe was still sleeping peacefully. I checked the lock on the door. I sat back down in the chair. I took out my phone and sent a message to Cyrus. The rat took the bait. "We have the weapon. Start the fire." The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the presidential suite, casting long, pale stripes across the bed where my daughter lay. It was a cruel kind of beauty, illuminating the tubes, the wires, and the dark bruising that was spreading across her face like a storm cloud. I had not slept. I sat in the chair watching her chest rise and fall, terrified that if I closed my eyes, the rhythm would stop. Then a sound broke the silence, a soft, wet gasp. I leaned forward. Zoe's eyes were open. They were glassy and unfocused, swimming in a haze of morphine and trauma. But they found me. Her hand, the one that wasn't splinted, reached out blindly. "Dad," she croaked. "The baby." I took her hand. It was so small in mine. I remembered holding it when she was 5 years old, crossing the street. I squeezed it gently. "The baby is safe, Zoe," I said, my voice thick with emotion I tried to hide. Dr. Eris checked. "The heartbeat is strong. You are both safe." Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over her lashes and running into her ears. She let out a sob that was more pain than sound. "He was there, Dad," she whispered. I knew who she meant. I did not want to talk about him. I did not want to pollute this room with his name. But she needed to say it. She needed to cut the poison out. "Garrett," she said. We were walking. Victoria stopped. She started talking about the lineage, about purity. She pushed me. I felt her hands. She squeezed my hand harder, her knuckles turning white. But Garrett saw. He was right there. He looked at me, Dad. He looked right into my eyes as I went over the edge. And he turned away. He just turned away. That broke me. I have lived 69 years. I have seen men die on construction sites. I have seen greed and hate. But the image of my daughter falling into the dark while the man who swore to protect her simply turned his back tore something loose in my chest. It was a pain so deep it felt like physical organ failure. He watched me fall. She sobbed. He didn't even scream. I stood up and kissed her forehead. I smoothed her hair. "He is gone, Zoe," I promised her. "He ran away last night. He is scared." And he should be. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying mix of fear and realization. "They wanted me dead." She said. "Yes," I said. "Because you are strong. Because you carry the future. And they are weak, dying things that hate the light. Rest now," I told her. "The guards are outside. No one gets in. I have some business to handle." I waited until the drugs pulled her back down into sleep. Then I walked into the hallway. My face was wet. I wiped it with my sleeve. The grief was gone. In its place was a cold, mechanical precision. It was time to pull the trigger on the trap I had been setting for 10 years. I took out my phone. I scrolled past my brother's number. I scrolled past my banker's. I stopped at a number labeled simply the cleaner. I dialed. It rang twice. "Mr. Blackwood." The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, and familiar. "Good morning, Mr. Vance," I said. There was a pause, a heavy silence that carried the weight of a decade of secrets. "I heard about the accident," Vance said. "I assume Mrs. Sterling is spinning the narrative as we speak. She tried to buy me off with $5,000 last night," I said. Vance chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "That sounds like her. She thinks everyone has a price tag that fits in her purse. Are you ready to pay your debt, Vance?" I asked. 10 years ago, Alexander Vance was a brilliant law student, drowning in student loans, about to drop out of Harvard. He was working 3 jobs. He was desperate. I found him. I saw the hunger in his eyes. I paid his tuition. I paid his rent. I bought his suits. I placed him in the best firm in Atlanta. And then I guided him step by step into the inner circle of the Sterling family. He became their fixer. He became their confidant. He became the repository of all their sins. He was my mole. He was my sleeper agent inside the castle walls. "I am ready," Vance said. "I have been waiting for this call, Lucius. They are monsters. You have no idea what they planned for her." "Tell me," I said. "I am looking at the file right now." Vance said, the sound of rustling papers coming through the line. "Victoria had me draw up a petition for involuntary commitment 3 weeks ago. She hired a corrupt psychiatrist, Dr. Thorne, to certify that Zoe was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and posed a danger to herself and the unborn child." My grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. "They were going to lock her up," I whispered. "Yes," Vance confirmed. The plan was to institutionalize her immediately after the baby was born. Garrett would get full custody. Victoria would raise the child to be a proper Sterling. And Zoe would rot in a state facility, medicated into oblivion, until she eventually died or killed herself. It was diabolical. It was cleaner than murder. It was a slow erasure of a human being. "Do you have the documents?" I asked. I have the drafts. I have the emails from Victoria instructing me on how to frame the narrative. I have the payment records to Dr. Thorne. I have it all, Lucius. It is a smoking gun. Good, I said. Keep them safe. Do not release them yet. Vance paused. Why not? This puts them in prison today. Because a document is just paper, I said. A good lawyer can argue it was a draft. They can argue it was never executed. They can claim attorney-client privilege. Then what do you need? Vance asked. I need a confession, I said. I need her to say it. I need her to look me in the eye and tell me she pushed my daughter because she hates her blood. I need the jury to hear the venom in her voice. I need the world to see the monster without her mask. She will never confess to you, Vance said. She thinks you are nobody. She thinks you are beneath her notice. Exactly, I said. Arrogance is a flaw, Vance. It makes people sloppy. She thinks she won last night. She thinks I took the check. She thinks I am a scared old man who ran away. I looked at my reflection in the hospital window. I saw the tiredness in my eyes. I saw the gray in my beard. I looked like a victim. I am going to give her a victory lap. I said, I am going to go to her house. I am going to beg. I am going to crawl. And when she feels powerful, when she feels like a god, she will tell me exactly why she did it. It is dangerous, Lucius, Vance warned. Garrett is unstable. If he is there, Garrett is running, I said. I broke his wrist last night when he tried to kill Zoe in her hospital bed. He will not be a problem. I hung up the phone. I had the legal trap. Vance was ready to turn state's evidence. Now I needed the performance of a lifetime. I went to my truck. I reached into the back under the seat and pulled out a bundle of clothes I kept for work on the sites. A faded flannel shirt with a tear in the shoulder, pants stained with oil and concrete dust, boots that were scuffed and muddy. I took off my watch. I took off the clean clothes Dr. Aris had given me. I dressed in the costume of the defeated. I rubbed dirt on my face. I messed up my hair. I practiced my posture in the side mirror, hunching my shoulders, lowering my head, letting my hands shake. I looked at the man in the mirror. He looked broken. He looked desperate. He looked like exactly the kind of man Victoria Sterling would enjoy destroying. I reached into the glove box and took out a button. It looked like a standard black button for a work shirt, but on the back was a micro lens and a transmitter. I sewed it onto the flannel shirt with clumsy, thick fingers. I synced it to the cloud server Cyrus monitored. I am coming for you, Victoria, I whispered. I started the truck. The engine coughed and sputtered, a perfect accompaniment to my charade. I drove out of the hospital lot and turned north toward the wealthy suburbs, toward the iron gates, toward the wolf's den. The rain had stopped, leaving the world gray and damp. The drive took 40 minutes. When I arrived at the Sterling estate, the gates were open. Several luxury cars were parked in the circular driveway. A catering van was unloading trays of food. They were having a party. Of course they were. They were celebrating the removal of the problem. I did not drive up to the front door. I parked my rusted truck on the grass right next to a gleaming Bentley. The contrast was offensive. It was perfect. I got out. I walked with a limp I did not have. I approached the front door where a security guard was standing. He looked at me with disdain. Deliveries in the back. Old man. He sneered. I took off my cap. I held it in my hands, twisting the fabric nervously. Please, sir, I said, my voice trembling. I need to see Mrs. Sterling. I am Zoe's father. I just want to talk. The guard laughed. She is hosting the garden club tea. She does not have time for you. Please, I begged. Just tell her Lucius is here. Tell her I came to apologize. Tell her I want to make things right. The guard rolled his eyes. He spoke into his earpiece. A moment later, he looked at me with a smirk. She says you can come in, but use the service entrance around the side. And wipe your feet. Do not track mud on her floors. I nodded, bowing my head in gratitude. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I walked around the side of the massive house. I passed the rose bushes I had run over the night before. They had already been replanted. Money fixes everything, they thought. I reached the service door. It opened before I could knock. A maid in a black uniform ushered me into the kitchen. It smelled of baking scones and expensive tea. Wait here, she said sharply. Do not touch anything. I stood on the doormat. I kept my head down. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. It was a power play. She wanted me to stew. She wanted me to feel my insignificance. Finally, the double doors swinging into the kitchen pushed open. Victoria Sterling walked in. She was wearing a white dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine. She held a porcelain teacup in one hand. She did not look at me. She looked at the floor around my feet, checking for dirt. "You have some nerve coming here," she said. Her voice was light conversational, as if she were talking about the weather. I dropped to my knees. It was not a figure of speech. I physically dropped to my knees on the kitchen tiles. The impact hurt my old joints, but I did not flinch. I looked up at her with watery eyes. "Mrs. Sterling, please," I whined. "I am sorry about last night. I was upset. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Victoria stopped sipping her tea. She looked down at me. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. This was what she wanted. This was the natural order of things in her world, the weak kneeling before the strong. "Oh, get up, Lucius. You look pathetic," she said, but she didn't mean it. She loved it. I stayed on the floor. "I just want to take Zoe away," I said. "You were right. She doesn't belong here. She is not like you. I will take her to my sisters in Alabama. You will never see us again. I need to know she will be safe from the police. I don't want an investigation." Victoria laughed. It was a tinkling melodic sound that masked a rotting soul. "Investigation? Do not be silly. Sheriff Miller was just here for a scone. He agrees it was a tragic accident. A clumsy girl slipping in the mud." She took a step closer, looming over me. She lowered her voice not out of fear but out of intimacy. She wanted to share the truth because she thought it didn't matter. "You are right, Lucius. She doesn't belong. I told Garrett that a mongrel bitch would never produce a thoroughbred heir. That baby, it was an insult to my family tree." I gripped my cap so hard my knuckles turned white. The camera on my chest was recording every frame, every pixel of her hate. "So you helped her leave," I whispered. Victoria leaned down. Her face was inches from mine. I could smell the Earl Grey tea on her breath. "I didn't just help her, you old fool. I pushed her, hard. I watched her eyes widen. I watched her grab for air, and I watched her hit the bottom. It was necessary. It was housekeeping. Just taking out the trash." She straightened up, smoothing her white dress. "Now get out of my house. Take your broken daughter and run away. If I see you in this town again, I won't push you off a cliff. I will have you buried under one." She turned and walked back toward the party, back to her friends, back to her life of perfect white lies. I stayed on the floor for 10 seconds. Then I stood up. I dusted off my knees. I put my cap back on my head. I reached up and tapped the button on my chest once. The recording saved. It uploaded. It was done. The shaking in my hands stopped. The fear in my eyes vanished. I looked at the swinging doors where she had disappeared. "Housekeeping," I whispered. I walked out the service door. I walked to my truck. I did not limp. I drove away from the Sterling mansion. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew exactly what was going to happen to that house. I was going to own it. And then I was going to burn it to the ground. I picked up my phone. "Cyrus," I said, "I have the confession." She admitted to the push. She admitted to the motive. "Good," Cyrus said. "Now it is my turn. Meet me at the First National Bank of Atlanta." "Why?" I asked. "Because we are going shopping," Cyrus said. "We are buying the debt. All of it." I stepped on the gas. The gardener was dead. The tycoon had returned, and he was hungry. I steered the rusted nose of my Ford F-150 onto the manicured lawn of the Sterling estate. I parked right next to a silver Bentley that cost more than the house I grew up in. The contrast was offensive. It was perfect. I killed the engine and stepped out into the drizzle. I was wearing the costume of the defeated, a flannel shirt stained with oil, work pants that had seen better decades, boots caked in the mud I had gathered from the hospital flower bed. I took off my watch. I took off my dignity. I was ready to play the role of the beggar. A security guard intercepted me before I could reach the mahogany front doors. He was a large man in a tight suit wearing an earpiece and an expression of utter contempt. He looked at my truck. He looked at my boots. He wrinkled his nose as if I were a bag of trash left on the curb. "Deliveries are in the back, old man," he sneered. I took off my grease-stained cap. I held it in my hands, twisting the fabric nervously. I hunched my shoulders, making myself look smaller, older, weaker. "Please, sir," I said, letting a tremor infect my voice. "I need to see Mrs. Sterling. I am Zoe S. father. I just want to talk to her. I want to apologize." The guard laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. "She is hosting the garden club tea. She does not have time for the likes of you. Please," I begged, "just tell her Lucius is here. Tell her I came to beg for forgiveness. Tell her I want to make things right." The guard rolled his eyes. He tapped his earpiece and muttered something. A moment later, he looked at me with a smirk. "She says you can come in, but use the service entrance around the side. And wipe your feet. Do not track mud on her floors. You wait outside the kitchen door until she calls for you." I nodded, bowing my head in exaggerated gratitude. "Thank you, sir. Thank you. God bless you." I walked around the side of the massive house. The rain was picking up, turning from a drizzle into a steady cold shower. I reached the service door. It was locked. I knocked. No one answered. I knocked again. Nothing. She knew I was there. She was making me wait. It was a power play. She wanted me soaked. She wanted me shivering. She wanted me to understand my place in her world was on the outside looking in. I stood there for 30 minutes. The water seeped through my flannel shirt. It ran down my neck. My bad knee started to ache with a deep throbbing rhythm. I did not move. I stared at the door handle, visualizing the woman on the other side. Every minute I stood in the rain was another zero I was going to add to the debt she owed me. Finally, the door opened. A maid in a black uniform ushered me into the kitchen. The room was larger than my entire house. It smelled of baking scones, expensive tea, and old money. The warmth hit me, making my wet clothes feel heavy and suffocating. "Wait here," the maid said sharply, pointing to a rough hemp doormat by the entrance. "Do not step off that mat. Mrs. Sterling will not have you ruining her imported tile. Do not touch anything." I stood on the doormat. I kept my head down. I dripped water onto the hemp. I waited. I could hear laughter coming from the main parlor, the tinkling of china, the murmur of polite, wealthy conversation. They were celebrating. They were drinking tea and eating tiny sandwiches while my daughter lay broken in a hospital bed. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, the double swinging doors pushed open. Victoria Sterling walked in. She was a vision of icy perfection. She wore a white dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine editorial. Pearls choked her neck. She held a porcelain teacup in one hand, the steam rising in delicate curls. She did not look at my face. She looked at my boots. She looked at the floor around my feet, checking for dirt. "You have some nerve coming here," she said. Her voice was light conversational, as if she were talking about a pest infestation. I did not speak immediately. I let the silence stretch. I let my shoulders slump further. Then I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I dropped to my knees. It was not a figure of speech. I physically dropped to my knees on the hard kitchen tiles. The impact sent a jolt of pain through my arthritic joints, but I did not flinch. I stayed there. A black man kneeling on a doormat in a white woman's kitchen. It was an image from a history my grandfather had fought to escape, but today it was a weapon. I looked up at her with watery eyes. I let my lip tremble. "Mrs. Sterling, please," I whined. "I am sorry about last night. I was upset. I did not mean to cause trouble at the hospital. I was confused." Victoria stopped sipping her tea. She looked down at me. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. This was what she wanted. This was the natural order of things in her twisted mind. The weak kneeling before the strong. The poor kneeling before the rich. "Oh, get up, Lucius. You look pathetic," she said, but her tone said, "Stay exactly where you are." She loved it. She was drinking in my humiliation like fine wine. I stayed on the floor. I clasped my hands together as if in prayer. "I just want to take Zoe away," I said, my voice cracking. "You were right. She does not belong here. She is not like you. She never was. I will take her to my sister's place in Alabama, deep in the country. You will never see us again. I just need to know she will be safe. I do not want an investigation. I do not want the police. I cannot afford a lawyer. Please, just let us go." Victoria laughed. It was a melodic sound that masked a rotting soul. She took a step closer, looming over me. She lowered her voice, not out of fear, but out of intimacy. She wanted to share the truth because she thought I was too broken to use it. She thought I was trash, and you do not fear the trash you are throwing out. Investigation. Do not be silly, Lucius. Sheriff Miller was just here for a scone. He agrees it was a tragic accident, a clumsy girl slipping in the mud, a girl with a history of mental instability. She leaned down, her face was inches from mine. I could smell the Earl Grey tea on her breath. I could see the heavy makeup settling into the lines around her eyes. You are right, Lucius. She does not belong. I told Garrett that a mongrel bitch would never produce a thoroughbred heir. That baby she is carrying, it was an insult to my family tree. A stain. I gripped my cap so hard my knuckles turned white. The camera hidden in the button of my shirt was recording every frame, every pixel of her hate. The microphone taped to my chest was catching every syllable. So you helped her leave, I whispered. I needed her to say it. I needed the verb. Victoria's eyes flashed with a terrifying coldness. I did not just help her, you old fool. I pushed her. Hard. There it was. The confession. I watched her eyes widen. Victoria continued, her voice filled with a sick pride. I watched her grab for air. I watched her realize that no one was coming to save her, and I watched her hit the bottom. It was necessary. It was housekeeping. Just taking out the trash so Garrett can have a real future. She straightened up, smoothing her white dress, looking at me with absolute indifference. Garrett is going to marry Senator Thorne's daughter in the spring, a girl with proper breeding, a girl with a future. Your daughter was just a placeholder, and now she is gone. She took a sip of her tea. Now get out of my house. Take your broken daughter and run to Alabama. Run to the moon for all I care. But if I see you in this town again, I want to push you off a cliff. I will have you buried under one, and nobody will even look for you. She turned her back on me. She started to walk back toward the swinging doors, back to her party, back to her friends, back to her life of perfect white lies. I stayed on the floor for exactly 10 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. Then I stood up. I did not stand up like an old man. I stood up like a steel beam being raised into place. The slouch vanished from my shoulders. The tremble left my hands. I dusted off my knees with a slow, deliberate motion. I put my cap back on my head, adjusting the brim. I reached up and tapped the button on my chest once. A tiny vibration confirmed the recording was saved and uploaded to the cloud server Cyrus was monitoring. The shaking in my hands stopped. The fear in my eyes vanished, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who has just signed a death warrant. I looked at her retreating back. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling," I said. My voice was no longer a whine. It was deep. It was resonant. It was the voice of the man who owned the bank she owed money to. Victoria stopped. She froze. The tone of my voice had registered. It was wrong. It did not fit the narrative she had built in her head. She turned around slowly, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What did you say?" she asked. "I said thank you," I repeated. "Thank you for confirming everything." I looked her directly in the eyes. I let the mask fall completely. I let her see the intelligence, the power, and the absolute hatred I had been hiding. She took a step back. The teacup rattled in its saucer. A flicker of unease crossed her face. She felt it, the shift in the air pressure, the realization that there was a wolf in her kitchen, and it was not the one on her knees. I turned and walked to the service door. I did not limp. I opened it and stepped out into the rain. "Lucius." She called out, her voice rising in pitch. "What does that mean? Come back here." I did not look back. I walked to my truck. I got in and started the engine. It roared to life. I drove away from the Sterling mansion, leaving deep ruts in her perfect lawn. I did not need to look back. I knew exactly what was going to happen to that house. I was going to own it, and then I was going to erase it from the map. I picked up my phone. I dialed Cyrus. "I have it," I said. She admitted to the push. She admitted to the dirty blood. She admitted she did it for the senator's daughter. "Good," Cyrus said. His voice was grim satisfaction. "I am at the First National Bank of Atlanta. The papers are ready." "Buy it," I said. "Buy the debt. Buy the mortgage. Buy the company credit lines. Buy it all." I stepped on the gas. The gardener was dead. The tycoon had returned, and he was coming to collect. I drove my truck straight from the Sterling estate to the gleaming glass tower of the First National Bank of Atlanta downtown. I did not go home to change. I did not wash the mud off my boots or the grease off my face. I walked through the revolving doors of the lobby looking like a man who had just finished a double shift at a construction site. The security guard at the front desk stepped forward, his hand resting on his taser. Sir, deliveries are at the loading dock, he said, his voice firm. You cannot be in here. I did not stop. I did not look at him. I walked straight to the private elevator bank reserved for executive leadership. The guard rushed to intercept me, grabbing my arm. Sir, I said, you need to leave. I stopped. I looked at his hand on my flannel sleeve. Then I looked at his face. My name is Lucius Blackwood, I said. I suggest you check your VIP roster before you touch me again. The guard hesitated. He had been trained to look for expensive suits, not dirt-stained work clothes. But there was something in my voice that made him pause. He keyed his radio. Dispatch check a Lucius Blackwood. There was a moment of static. Then the radio squawked back with a tone of panic. Clear him. Clear him immediately. That is the majority shareholder of the holding group. Let him through. The guard went pale. He released my arm as if it were red-hot iron. He stepped back, fumbling for an apology. I didn't know, sir. I am so sorry. I ignored him. I swiped my thumb across the biometric scanner of the elevator. The doors slid open. I stepped in and pressed the button for the top floor. The ride was smooth and silent. I watched the city shrink below me. I watched the people looking like ants. This was the view Victoria Sterling thought belonged only to her kind. She was wrong. When the elevator doors opened, I walked past the reception desk. The executive assistant, a young woman named Sarah, jumped up from her chair. Mr. Blackwood, she gasped. We weren't expecting you. Mr. Henderson is in a meeting. I walked past her. I pushed open the double mahogany doors of the bank president's office. Robert Henderson was sitting behind his massive oak desk talking to two men in suits. When he saw me, he stopped mid-sentence. He looked at my clothes. He looked at the mud I was tracking onto his Persian rug. Lucius, he said, standing up. What is the meaning of this? Get out, I told the two men. They looked at Henderson. He nodded nervously. They gathered their papers and fled. Henderson remained standing, gripping the edge of his desk. He knew who I was. He knew that 40 years ago I had deposited my first million in his father's bank. He knew that over the decades I had quietly bought enough shares through shell companies to fire him with a single phone call. I want the Sterling file, I said. Henderson swallowed. Lucius, you know I can't do that. Client confidentiality is the cornerstone of this institution. I walked around the desk. I sat in his leather chair. It groaned under my weight. I am not asking as a client, Robert. I am asking as the man who owns the building you are standing in. Show me the file. Henderson sighed. He typed a password into his computer. He turned the screen toward me. It was worse than I thought. It was beautiful. The Sterling Corporation was a shell. They had liquidated their assets 5 years ago to pay for Victoria's lifestyle. The mansion was leveraged to the hilt. They had missed their last 3 mortgage payments. She was here this morning, Henderson said quietly. She was begging for an extension. She said she is marrying her son off to Senator Thorne's daughter next month and the dowry would cover the arrears. She is selling her son to pay her mortgage, I said. Henderson nodded. We were going to foreclose Lucius. The board met yesterday. The risk is too high, but she asked for 30 days. She played the legacy card. She reminded us that her grandfather founded this bank. And what did you say? We gave her the extension. Henderson admitted. We didn't want the bad press of evicting a Sterling. I looked at the numbers. $15 million. That was the total debt. Mortgage, business loans, personal lines of credit. It was a staggering amount of money for most people. For Victoria Sterling, it was the noose around her neck. I want to buy the note, I said. Henderson blinked. What? I want to buy the debt, I repeated. All of it. The mortgage, the company loans, everything. I want to be the sole creditor of the Sterling estate. Henderson laughed nervously. Lucius, that is $15 million in toxic assets. You would be throwing your money away. They can't pay. You will never see a dime of return. I don't want a return, I said. I want the collateral. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I initiated a transfer from the grandfather trust the account Silas Blackwood had started with the money he saved from mixing concrete. Transfer incoming, I said. $15 million. Clear it. Henderson watched his screen. A notification popped up. His eyes went wide. The money was there. It was real. You are serious, he whispered. Draft the paperwork I ordered. Transfer the rights to Blackwood Holdings immediately. I want the deed. I want the title. I want the power to foreclose. Henderson typed furiously. He printed a stack of documents. He was shaking. He knew he was witnessing an execution. You realize what this means, he said as he slid the papers across the desk for me to sign. Once you sign this, you become their landlord. You become their bank. You have the right to call the loan immediately. I picked up his gold pen. It felt heavy in my hand. I signed my name, Lucius Silas Blackwood. The ink looked like black blood on the white paper. It is done, I said. Henderson stamped the documents. He handed me a heavy folder. Congratulations, Lucius. You just bought a sinking ship. I stood up. I took the folder. I didn't buy a ship, Robert. I bought a wrecking ball. I turned to leave. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Cyrus. Where are you? He asked. I am leaving the bank, I said. I have the papers. I own them, Cyrus. I own the roof over their heads. Good, Cyrus said. Because you are going to want to come to the mansion right now. I am parked outside the gate. Why, what is happening? The catering trucks are lining up, Cyrus said, his voice thick with anticipation. They are setting up a tent the size of a football field on the lawn. Valets are arriving. Security is sweeping the grounds. I smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. Let me guess, I said. It is the annual Heritage Gala, Cyrus confirmed, the biggest charity event of the season. The governor is on the guest list. The mayor is coming. Every rich and powerful person in Georgia is going to be there tonight to kiss Victoria Sterling's ring. It was perfect. It was better than I could have planned. She had gathered an audience. She had set the stage for her own destruction. She wanted to show the world her power. I would show them her ruin. I checked my watch. It was 5 p.m. The party started at 7. Go home and get the suits, I told Cyrus. The good ones. And bring the boys. The boys meant the security team we used for high-risk construction sites. Men who were bigger than the bank guards. Men who answered only to us. You are going to crash the party, Cyrus asked. I am not crashing it, I said, walking toward the elevator. I am the host. It is my house now. I stepped into the elevator. I looked at the folder in my hand. Inside was the legal authority to destroy Victoria Sterling's life. She had pushed my daughter off a cliff in the dark. I was going to push her off her throne under the bright lights of a chandelier. I drove home. I showered, scrubbing the mud and the grease from my skin. I shaved. I put on the bespoke black suit I had bought in Italy 5 years ago. I put on my gold watch. I looked in the mirror. The gardener was gone. The old man who knelt on the kitchen floor was gone. Staring back at me was Lucius Blackwood the Titan. I picked up the folder. I picked up the syringe I had taken from Garrett. I picked up the flash drive with the video of Victoria's confession. It is time, I whispered. I walked out to my car, not the truck. The black Rolls-Royce Phantom that stayed under a tarp in my garage. I started the engine. It purred like a panther. Tonight the Sterlings would learn that you do not start a war with a man who builds the ground you walk on. Tonight, the foundation would crumble. The Sterling estate looked like a diamond dropped into a sea of darkness. The lawn where I had parked my rusted truck just hours earlier was now covered by a massive white marquee tent that glowed from within. Chandeliers hung from the canvas ceiling. A string quartet played Mozart near the entrance. Valets in red jackets were parking Ferraris and Porsches. It was a spectacle of wealth and power. But I knew the truth. It was a funeral wake for a dynasty that didn't know it was dead yet. I watched from the tinted window of my Rolls-Royce Phantom parked just outside the main gate. Inside the tent, Victoria Sterling stood on a raised platform. She was bathed in a spotlight. She wore a necklace of sapphires that glittered under the lights. I knew for a fact those stones were rented. My banking contacts had flagged the transaction this afternoon. She was wearing borrowed glory to hide her bankruptcy. She held a microphone in one hand and a flute of champagne in the other. Her voice drifted out over the speakers, smooth and cultured. Tonight we celebrate legacy, she said. We celebrate the values that built this community. Faith, family, honor. The crowd applauded. The mayor was there clapping enthusiastically. The governor nodded in approval. They were all drinking her wine, unaware that the woman pouring it had pushed a pregnant girl off a cliff to protect her social standing. Next to her stood Garrett. He was wearing a black sling on his arm, supporting the wrist I had shattered the night before. He looked pale and tragic. He was playing the role of the devastated husband perfectly. My poor son. She continued, placing a hand on his good shoulder. He is going through a terrible trial. His wife Zoe had a tragic accident yesterday. But even in his grief, he is here because duty calls. That is the Sterling way. Garrett looked down at his shoes, feigning humility. It made me sick. It made the bile rise in my throat. He wasn't grieving. He was terrified. He was looking at the exits, wondering if the man who broke his bones was coming back. He didn't have to wonder anymore. "Let us go," I said to Cyrus. My brother nodded. He spoke into his radio. "Move in." The Phantom rolled forward, gliding through the open gates like a shark entering a swimming pool. Behind us, 2 black SUVs followed, filled with the security team. We didn't stop at the valet stand. We drove right up to the entrance of the tent, blocking the path of the waiters. I stepped out. The silence that rippled through the crowd started at the entrance and spread inward like a wave. I was not the gardener anymore. I was not the beggar in the flannel shirt. I was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit cut from midnight blue silk. My shoes were handcrafted Italian leather. On my wrist sat a gold Patek Philippe that cost more than Garrett's car. I stood tall, my shoulders squared, my eyes fixed on the stage. Cyrus stepped out beside me, looking like a mountain in a tuxedo. 6 of our men flanked us, forming a wedge. We began to walk. A wall of security guards intercepted us. The head of the detail, a man named Sullivan, stepped forward. He put a hand on my chest. "Sir, this is a private event," he said. "I need to see an invitation." I looked at his hand. Then I looked at his eyes. "Remove your hand, Sullivan," I said calmly, "or you will lose it." Sullivan blinked, surprised that I knew his name. He hesitated, sensing the danger radiating off me. "I don't know who you are, sir, but Mrs. Sterling gave strict orders. No uninvited guests, especially not—" He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he was going to say. "Especially not the old black man who came to the back door." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a folded document with a blue legal cover. I snapped it open and held it up to his face. "Read the header," I ordered. Sullivan squinted. He read the bold text at the top of the deed. "Transfer of ownership. Sterling Estate. Property of Blackwood Holdings." His eyes went wide. He looked at the date. It was stamped today at 4:55 p.m. "I am not a guest, Sullivan," I said, my voice carrying over the music. "I am the owner. You are standing on my grass, you are guarding my house, and unless you want to be unemployed in the next 10 seconds, you will get out of my way." Sullivan looked at the stage where Victoria was still speaking. Then he looked at the document. He was a professional. He knew who signed his checks. And he realized that the signature on the bottom of his next paycheck was going to be mine. He stepped back. He signaled his men. "Let them through," he said into his radio. "Stand down. Clear a path." The wall of guards parted. The path to the stage was open. I walked down the center aisle. The guests turned to stare. They whispered behind their hands. "Who is that? Is that Lucius? No, it can't be. He looks like a king." I locked eyes with Victoria. She stopped mid-sentence. Her mouth hung open, the glass of champagne tilted in her hand, threatening to spill. She saw me. She saw the suit. She saw the way the security guards bowed their heads as I passed, and for the first time, fear cracked her porcelain mask. She looked at Garrett. Garrett looked like he was about to vomit. He grabbed his mother's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "He is here," Garrett whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. He came back. I reached the stairs to the stage. I walked up them slow and deliberate. Every step was a drumbeat of doom. I walked past the mayor who looked confused. I walked past the governor who looked intrigued. I stopped in front of Victoria Sterling. She smelled of fear now. It cut through her expensive perfume. A sour metallic scent. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "Security. Get him out. Get this trash out of here." No one moved. Sullivan and his team stood with their backs to the stage, facing the crowd, protecting me. "Your security works for me now, Victoria," I said. I reached out and took the microphone from her hand. She was too shocked to resist. Her fingers were cold and stiff. I turned to the crowd. 500 of the wealthiest people in Atlanta were staring at me. The silence was absolute. Even the crickets outside seemed to hold their breath. "Good evening," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, deep and resonant. It commanded attention. It demanded respect. My name is Lucius Blackwood. Some of you know me as the man who paved your driveways. Some of you know me as the man who fixed your roofs. But tonight I stand before you with a different title. I paused, letting the tension build. I am the new owner of this estate. I bought the mortgage this afternoon. I bought the company debt. I bought the very ground you are standing on. A gasp went through the crowd. Victoria let out a strangled shriek. Liar, that is a lie. This is my house. My family built this. Your family stole this, I corrected her, turning to face her. My grandfather, Silas Blackwood, owned this land 70 years ago. Your father took it with fire and forged deeds. Today I took it back with cash and ink. I turned back to the audience. This party is over. You are all trespassing on private property, but before you leave there is something you need to see. Garrett lunged at me. It was a desperate, clumsy move fueled by panic. Shut up, he screamed. Shut him up, mother. He tried to grab the microphone with his good hand. I didn't even flinch. Cyrus stepped out of the shadows behind me. He moved with a speed that defied his size. He caught Garrett by the throat and lifted him off his feet. Sit down, boy, Cyrus growled. He threw Garrett into a chair. Garrett crumbled, clutching his broken wrist, whimpering in pain. You are insane, Victoria screamed. You cannot do this. I am Victoria Sterling. I am this town. You are a murderer, I said into the microphone. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. The crowd froze. You pushed my daughter off a cliff, I said. You tried to kill your own grandchild because you didn't want mixed blood in your family. And when that didn't work, you sent your son to the hospital to finish the job with a syringe. Slander, Victoria shrieked. That is slander. I will sue you. I will destroy you. You can try, I said. But it is hard to sue when you are in prison. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. I pointed it at the massive projection screen behind the stage which had been displaying the Sterling family crest. I told you I came to apologize, Victoria, I said. I told you I wanted to make things right. And you believed me because you think you are untouchable. You confessed everything because you thought I was a nobody. I pressed the button. The screen flickered. The crest vanished. In its place appeared a high-definition video. It was the recording from the button camera on my chest. The image was crystal clear. Victoria Sterling standing in her kitchen wearing her white dress, looking down at me with a cruel smile. Her voice boomed through the speakers, amplified 1,000 times. I didn't just help her, you old fool. I pushed her, hard. I watched her eyes widen, I watched her grab for air, and I watched her hit the bottom. It was necessary. It was housekeeping, just taking out the trash. The video played on. The crowd watched in horrified silence. They heard her call my daughter a mongrel. They heard her admit to the attempted murder. They heard the pure, unadulterated evil dripping from her voice. When the video ended, the screen went black. Victoria stood there frozen. Her face was gray, her mouth worked, but no sound came out. She looked at the crowd, her friends, her allies, her social circle. They were looking back at her with expressions of absolute revulsion. The mayor turned his back. The governor signaled his security detail to leave. The illusion was shattered. The queen was naked. I dropped the remote on the floor. It clattered loudly. Get off my stage, I said. Victoria looked at me. Her eyes were empty. The arrogance was gone, extinguished like a candle in a hurricane. She looked at Garrett, who was sobbing in his chair. She looked at the house she no longer owned. Then the sirens started. Not in the distance, right at the gate. Blue and red lights flashed against the canvas of the tent. It wasn't the local sheriff. It was a convoy of black SUVs with federal plates. I looked at Victoria. I didn't call the sheriff, I whispered to her. I called the FBI. Attempted murder across state lines involving insurance fraud and banking crimes. It is a federal case now. Victoria Sterling collapsed. Her legs simply gave out. She fell to the stage in a heap of white silk and rented sapphires. I walked past her. I walked down the stairs. I walked through the parting crowd. No one spoke to me. They just watched with awe and terror. I walked out of the tent into the cool night air. The rain had cleared. The stars were out. It is done, I said to Cyrus. Not yet, he replied, looking at the house. We still have to tear it down. Soon, I said. First let them rot. I got into my car. The engine purred. I drove away, leaving the flashing lights and the ruins of the Sterling dynasty in my rearview mirror. I had a daughter to visit, and a grandson to wait for. The debt was paid. The image on the massive projection screen was 10 feet tall and clearer than a mirror. It showed Victoria Sterling in her pristine white kitchen holding a teacup like a weapon. The audio boomed through the concert-grade speakers, shaking the very ground of the tent. It was the voice of a monster. "I did not just help her, you old fool, I pushed her hard." The words echoed off the canvas walls. The 500 guests stood frozen. The champagne flutes in their hands were forgotten. The polite conversation died instantly, strangled by the raw confession of attempted murder. I watched the crowd. I saw the exact moment their admiration turned to revulsion. These were people who tolerated tax evasion and adultery, but murder was too messy for them. Murder was too loud. The video continued. Victoria S.'s voice filled the tent again, dripping with venom. It was necessary. It was housekeeping, just taking out the trash. The silence broke. It started as a gasp, a collective intake of breath from the city's elite. Then came the murmur. Then came the phones. Hundreds of smartphones went up in the air like a sea of fireflies. They were not recording the gala anymore. They were live streaming the downfall of the Sterling Empire. The hashtags were already spreading. The video I had uploaded to the cloud seconds before taking the stage was hitting social media feeds across Atlanta. Millions of people were watching Victoria Sterling admit to pushing a pregnant woman off a cliff because her blood was not pure enough. I looked down at Victoria. She was on her knees on the stage. She was staring up at her own face on the screen. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. She tried to cover her ears, but she could not block out the sound of her own hate. "Turn it off," she shrieked. Her voice was thin and hysterical, lost under the booming audio. "It is a lie. It is a deep fake. Turn it off." No one moved to help her. No one ran to the sound booth. The technicians were my men now. They let the video loop. They let her confess over and over again. Every repetition was another nail in her coffin. Garrett Sterling snapped. He had been sitting in his chair weeping, but the sound of his mother's voice and the sight of the crowd turning against them broke something inside him. He looked at me. I was standing at the podium, calm and untouchable. I was the architect of his ruin. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a rabid, mindless fury. "You ruined us!" he screamed. "You filthy animal!" He lunged. It was a clumsy, desperate charge. His right arm was in a sling, broken from our encounter the night before. But he had a steak knife in his good left hand, snatched from a nearby table. He ran up the stairs to the stage, his eyes fixed on my throat. He wanted blood. He wanted to silence the man who had exposed them. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I did not even raise my hands. I knew who was standing in the shadows behind me. Cyrus stepped into the light. My brother moved with a speed that defied his size. He did not block the knife. He ignored it. He stepped inside Garrett S. guard. He grabbed Garrett S. good arm, the one holding the blade. There was a sound like a dry branch snapping in a winter storm. It was loud enough to be heard over the video. Garrett screamed. The knife clattered to the floor. Cyrus did not stop. He swept Garrett S. legs out from under him. Garrett hit the stage hard, face first. Cyrus placed a heavy boot on Garrett S. back, pinning him to the floor like an insect. "Stay down, boy," Cyrus growled. "Unless you want me to break the other one." Garrett writhed on the floor, sobbing into the carpet. He was broken in body and spirit. The crowd gasped again, recoiling from the violence, but they could not look away. It was primal. It was justice. Victoria saw her son fall. She saw the brute force that protected me. She realized that her money, her name, and her connections meant nothing here. Physical force and absolute truth were the only currencies that mattered on this stage. She scrambled to her feet. She looked at the crowd. She saw judgment in their eyes. She saw the mayor turning his back. She saw the governor whispering to his security detail. She had to run. She gathered her skirts and stumbled down the stairs. "Out of my way," she screamed at a group of women standing near the aisle. "Let me pass." These were women she had known for 30 years. They were members of her garden club. They were her bridesmaids. They were the godmothers of her son. They did not move. Mrs. Vander Hoven, the matriarch of the oldest family in Georgia, stepped forward. She was 80 years old and commanded more respect than the president. She looked at Victoria with a gaze that could freeze water. "You disgust me, Victoria," Mrs. Vander Hoven said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. "A pregnant girl. You are a monster." Victoria recoiled as if she had been slapped. She turned to the left. Senator Thorne was standing there, the man whose daughter she wanted Garrett to marry. "Senator, please," she begged, reaching out a hand. "You know me. Help me." Senator Thorne stepped back. He brushed his suit jacket where her hand had almost touched him, as if she were contagious. "Do not touch me," he said coldly. The wedding is off. My daughter will not go near your family." The circle closed. The guests formed a wall of expensive suits and evening gowns. They blocked the exits. They blocked the path to the mansion. They trapped her in the center of the tent under the bright lights, exposed and alone. She spun around looking for an escape, looking for a friend. She found none. She was a pariah. She was quarantined by her own cruelty. Then the tent flaps at the main entrance were thrown open. It was not the local police. It was not Sheriff Miller coming to smooth things over with a handshake and a bribe. 12 agents in windbreakers with yellow letters on the back marched in. FBI. Behind them were troopers from the Georgia State Police. They moved with military precision, fanning out to secure the perimeter. Leading them was Mr. Vance. Victoria saw him. Her eyes lit up with a desperate hope. "Vance," she shouted. "Thank God. Tell them this is a mistake. Get these people out of here. Sue them all." Vance walked up the aisle. He did not look at her. He looked at me. He nodded once, a small gesture of respect between soldiers. Then he turned to the lead FBI agent. "That is her," Vance said, pointing at Victoria. "And the man on the stage is her son. I have the files in my car. The insurance fraud, the wire fraud, and the conspiracy to commit murder." Victoria froze. Her lawyer, her fixer, the man who knew where all the bodies were buried. "Et tu," she whispered. Vance looked at her with cold eyes. "Lucius paid for my law school, Victoria. He paid for my first suit. He put me in your office 10 years ago. I never worked for you. I was his eyes." The scream that ripped from Victoria's throat was not human. It was the sound of a soul shattering. The FBI agents moved in. They did not be gentle. They grabbed her arms and pulled them behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "Victoria Sterling, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Zoe Blackwood, for conspiracy to commit murder for insurance fraud, and for banking fraud involving a federally insured institution. You have the right to remain silent." Another team of agents went up to the stage. Cyrus lifted his boot. They hauled Garrett up. He was limp, weeping uncontrollably, snot and tears ruining his tuxedo. They cuffed his good hand to his belt. I stood on the podium watching them being dragged away. Victoria fought them. She kicked. She bit. She was feral. "You lied to me," she screamed at me, spitting foam. "You tricked me. You are nobody. You are just a builder. You are a dirty laborer." I leaned into the microphone one last time. "I am a builder, Victoria," I said, my voice calm and final, "and I just demolished your life." The agents dragged her out of the tent into the night where the flashing blue lights waited to take her to a cage. The guests watched in silence. The music had stopped. The party was over. The dynasty had fallen. I looked at Cyrus. He was smiling. It was a terrifying smile. "Let us go home, brother," I said. We walked down the aisle. The crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. They looked at me with fear. They looked at me with awe. They knew now. They knew that the man in the Tom Ford suit was not just a rich man. He was a force of nature. I walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It smelled of rain and justice. The war was over. I had won. But there was still work to do. I had a daughter to heal. And I had a legacy to rebuild on the ashes of the Sterling name. The phone rang at 4 a.m. It was not a time for good news. It was the time for disasters and declarations of war. I was awake. I was sitting in the command center I had set up in the guest house of my secure compound on the coast. Zoe was asleep in the main house guarded by 3 former Navy SEALs. The baby was safe. But I knew the war was not over. A wounded animal is the most dangerous thing in the woods, and I had wounded the queen wolf. I picked up the phone. It was Vance. "She is out, Lucius," Vance said. His voice was tight. "She posted bail, $2 million. A shady bail bondsman in Miami put up the collateral. She liquidated her jewelry. She called in every favor she had left from her father as old political cronies. She is on the street." I did not panic. I did not yell. I looked at the bank of monitors on the wall. "Where is she, Vance?" I asked. "She is off the grid," Vance replied. "She ditched her phone. She rented a car under a fake name. The FBI is tracking her, but they lost the signal 20 minutes ago near the interstate. Lucius, she is insane. She has nothing left to lose. She thinks you destroyed her life. She is coming for you." I looked at the screen that showed the live feed from my old property, the small wooden house where I had raised Zoe. The house Victoria Sterling had called a hovel. It sat dark and empty in the middle of the woods. "Let her come," I said. "You need to move Zoe," Vance urged. "You need to go into protective custody." "Zoe is safe," I said. "Victoria does not know about the island. She does not know about the compound. In her mind, I am still the poor laborer. In her mind, I retreated to the only place she thinks I own." "You are using yourself as bait," Vance realized. "No," I said. "I am using a ghost." I hung up. I sat back in my chair. I watched the monitors. I knew Victoria Sterling better than she knew herself. She was a narcissist. She had been humiliated in front of the entire world. She had lost her home. She had lost her status. She did not want to flee the country. She did not want to hide. She wanted to burn the source of her pain. She wanted to erase me. I waited. The sun went down. The moon rose. The woods around my old house were silent. Then at 2 a.m, a shadow moved on screen 4. It was a sedan. Cheap, nondescript. It parked down the road. 3 men got out. They were not professionals. They moved clumsily, carrying red jerry cans. They were hired muscle, probably recruited from a dive bar for a few $1,000s. And then I saw her. Victoria Sterling stepped out of the car. She was not wearing her white dress anymore. She was wearing dark clothes, but she still wore her pearls. Even in her madness, she clung to the symbols of her status. She looked haggard. Her hair was wild. Her eyes, even through the grainy night vision camera, looked manic. She pointed at the house. She gave an order. The men moved in. They splashed gasoline on the porch. They doused the walls. They broke a window and threw a can inside. I watched from my secure location 50 miles away. My finger hovered over the button that would alert the tactical team hiding in the woods. But I waited. I needed the act to be completed. I needed the intent to be undeniable. One of the men lit a flare. The red light illuminated his face. He threw it. The old wood caught instantly. The house had been dry for years. The flames roared up the side of the porch, licking at the roof. The fire spread with terrifying speed, turning the night into day. The men ran back to the car. But Victoria did not run. She stood there. She stood in the middle of the dirt road, illuminated by the inferno she had created. I zoomed in on her face. She was laughing. It was a rictus of pure, unadulterated hate. She thought I was in there. She thought Zoe was in there. She thought she was watching us burn. She raised her hands to the sky as if thanking a dark god for her victory. "Burn!" she screamed. I could not hear her, but I could read her lips. "Burn, you filth." The house collapsed inward. The roof gave way, sending a plume of sparks into the sky. It was a total loss. Everything inside was ash. Victoria got back into the car. The sedan sped away, leaving only the crackling of the fire and the smoke rising into the night. I picked up my radio. "Did you get it?" I asked. "Every frame," Cyrus replied. He was in the woods 500 yards away with a long-range thermal camera. "We have her face. We have the license plate. We have the accelerant. We have the intent." "Let them go," I said. "Let them think they got away with it. Let her sleep tonight thinking she won. The fall will be harder in the morning." I watched the fire burn down on the monitor. That house held memories. It was where I taught Zoe to walk. It was where my wife had died peacefully in her sleep. It was a holy place. And Victoria Sterling had desecrated it. But a house is just wood and stone. My family was safe. And Victoria had just walked into a steel trap. The next morning, the sun rose over a pile of smoking black rubble. The air smelled of charcoal and wet ash. I was sitting in the interrogation room at the FBI field office in Atlanta. I was wearing my work clothes again, the flannel shirt, the boots. I wanted her to see the gardener one last time. The door opened. 2 agents dragged Victoria Sterling into the room. She was wearing the same clothes from the night before. She smelled of smoke and gasoline. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. She looked wild. When she saw me sitting there alive and unharmed, her eyes bulged. She stopped struggling. She went completely still. "You," she whispered. "You are dead. I watched you burn." I leaned forward. I placed my elbows on the metal table. "You watched an empty house burn, Victoria," I said. "I haven't lived there in 10 years. It was a decoy. It was a mousetrap. And you wanted the cheese so badly you didn't see the spring." Victoria shook her head. Her reality was fracturing. No, no. You were inside. I know you were. You are a rat. Rats live in holes. I burned the hole. Agent Miller, the lead investigator, stepped forward. He placed a laptop on the table. He turned the screen toward her. Mrs. Sterling, he said, we have video evidence of you ordering 3 men to set fire to a residential property. We have thermal imaging of you watching the blaze. We have your rental agreement for the car. We have the confessions of the 3 men we arrested an hour ago. They gave you up for a plea deal. They said you paid them $10,000 to burn the house down with people inside. Victoria looked at the screen. She saw herself laughing in the firelight. She saw the monster she had become. This changes things, Victoria, I said softly. Attempted murder is hard to prove sometimes. Lawyers can argue intent, but arson, burning down a dwelling in the middle of the night, using chemical accelerants, crossing state lines to hire thugs. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle on her shoulders. That is not just a crime, Victoria. That is domestic terrorism. That is a federal offense with a mandatory minimum sentence. There is no bail for terrorists. There is no parole. Victoria slumped into the chair. The fight went out of her. The madness faded, replaced by a crushing clarity. She looked at her hands, the hands that had held teacups, the hands that had pushed my daughter. Now they were covered in soot. Why? She whispered. Why won't you just die? Why do you keep winning? You are nobody. I stood up. I walked to the door. I looked back at her. I am a builder, Victoria. I build things that last. You are a destroyer. And destroyers always end up burying themselves in the rubble. She looked at me. Her eyes were empty. The Queen of Atlanta was gone. All that was left was a sad old woman who was going to die in a concrete box. I have one more thing for you, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a photo. It was a picture of the sonogram Dr. Eris had taken yesterday. A grainy black and white image of a tiny life. My grandson. He is a boy, I said. He is strong. He has the Blackwood chin, and he is going to grow up on the land your father stole. He is going to run through the gardens you planted. He is going to sleep in the rooms you decorated, and he will never know your name. I slid the photo across the table. Victoria looked at it. She looked at the future she had tried to kill. And then she broke. She put her head on the table and she screamed. It was a raw animal sound of total defeat. She screamed until her voice gave out. She screamed for her lost legacy. She screamed for her wasted hate. I walked out of the room. I walked out of the FBI building. The agents nodded to me as I passed. They knew. They knew I had done their job for them. Cyrus was waiting in the truck. He had a cigar in his mouth unlit. Is it done? He asked. It is done, I said. She is gone. She will never hurt anyone again. What about the house? Cyrus asked. The mansion. I looked at the city skyline. Tear it down, I said. Level it. I don't want a single brick left standing. I want the earth salted. And then we build a park, I said. A public park. For everyone. And we name it after grandfather Silas. Cyrus smiled. He lit his cigar. The old man would have liked that. I got into the truck. We drove away. The nightmare was over. The sun was shining. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. I felt clean. I had walked through the fire and I had not been burned. I was Lucius Blackwood, and I was going home to hold my family. The federal detention center smelled of bleach and despair. It was a cold, antiseptic smell that tried to cover up the scent of fear sweating out of 1,000 inmates. I walked through the security checkpoints. I did not have to take off my belt or my shoes. I had clearance. I walked down the long gray corridor accompanied by a guard who nodded to me with respect. I was not just a visitor. I was the reason 2 of their highest-profile prisoners were currently rotting in solitary confinement. I entered the visitation room. It was divided by thick plexiglass scarred by years of angry fists and desperate rings. On the other side sat the remnants of the Sterling dynasty. Garrett was brought in first. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair was shaved. His face was gaunt. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a trembling, pathetic terror. He sat down. He picked up the phone. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Lucius, he sobbed. Please, you have to help me. I can't survive in here. They know who I am. They know I came from money. They are going to kill me. I looked at him through the glass. I saw the boy who had married my daughter. I saw the man who had promised to protect her. And I saw the coward who had tried to stop her heart with a needle because he was afraid of his mother. "Help you?" I asked. My voice was flat. "Why would I help you, Garrett?" "I didn't want to do it," he pleaded. Tears ran down his face, dripping onto the orange fabric. "Mom made me. She pushed me. I loved Zoe. I swear I loved her. I was just scared. Please talk to the prosecutor. Tell them I was coerced. Tell them I am a victim too." I leaned forward. The plastic of the phone felt cold against my ear. "You are not a victim, Garrett," I said. "You are a man, and a man makes choices. You chose to stand on that cliff and watch my daughter fall. You chose to walk into her hospital room. You chose to pick up that syringe." "But I didn't inject her," he cried. "You stopped me." "Because I was there," I said. "If I hadn't been there, she would be dead. You held the weapon. You made the decision. Do not blame your mother for your lack of a spine." I hung up the phone. Garrett screamed silently behind the glass, banging his good hand against the barrier. He was begging, he was pleading, but I felt nothing. He had forfeited his right to mercy the moment he turned his back on his wife. The guards dragged him away, kicking and screaming, back to his cage. Then they brought her in. Victoria Sterling looked older. The prison lighting was harsh. It showed every wrinkle, every line of bitterness etched into her face. Her hair was gray and lank. Without her pearls, without her white dresses, without her rented status, she looked small. She looked ordinary. She sat down. She did not pick up the phone immediately. She stared at me with eyes that still burned with hate. Even in chains, she tried to summon the ghost of her superiority. She picked up the receiver slowly, as if she were doing me a favor. "You look pleased with yourself, Lucius," she said. Her voice was raspy. "I am satisfied," I corrected her. "Justice is satisfying." "Justice," she spat. "This is not justice. This is a trick. This is a con. You are a fraud, Lucius. You are a laborer who got lucky. You manipulated the system. You bribed people. You stole my life. I did not steal anything I said. I bought it. I paid market price for your debt. I paid for your arrogance." She leaned closer to the glass. Her eyes searched my face, looking for an answer that had eluded her for weeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why us? Why did you have so much money? You are nobody. You are a construction worker. Why did you target my family? Was it just because of Zoe? Was it just because I didn't like your daughter?" I looked at her. It was time. It was time to pull the final curtain back and show her the machinery of her destruction. "You think this started with Zoe?" I asked. "You think this started 6 months ago?" "Victoria, you are so blind. This started 70 years ago." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" "My grandfather was Silas Blackwood," I said. The name meant nothing to her. Of course it didn't. To her family, people like my grandfather were furniture. They were tools. They were invisible. He was a farmer. I continued. He saved every penny he earned. In 1950, he bought 500 acres of land in this county. He was the first black man to own property of that size here. He was proud. He had a deed. He had a future. I paused, letting the story sink in. "Your grandfather was Judge Sterling. He didn't like that. He didn't like seeing a black man prosper on land he wanted for his hunting club. So he used the law. He fabricated tax liens. He forged signatures. And when the law was too slow, he sent men in white hoods to burn my grandfather's barn. They beat him, Victoria. They beat him until he could not walk. And then they took the land." Victoria's eyes widened. She knew the history of her estate. She knew how her family had acquired their wealth, even if she never spoke of it. "That land," I said, pointing a finger at the glass. "The land your mansion stood on. The land where you hosted your parties. The land where you pushed my daughter. That was Blackwood land." I leaned back. My grandfather survived. He moved to the city. He started mixing concrete. He told me the story every night. He told me that they stole our dirt so we would build the roads they drove on. He told me to work. He told me to save. And he told me to wait. "I did not buy your debt by accident, Victoria. I have been watching you for 40 years. I watched your father drink away the fortune. I watched you spend what was left on parties and appearances. I watched you leverage the house. I watched you drown. I bought every loan I said. I bought every promissory note. I bought every mistake you made. I was your bank, Victoria. I was the invisible hand holding you up, just waiting for the right moment to let you drop. Victoria looked horrified. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her entire life, her entire privileged existence had been a long, slow trap set by the people she despised. Zoe marrying Garrett was chance, I admitted. Fate has a sense of humor. But destroying you, taking back what was ours, that was destiny. I didn't just want to beat you. I wanted to evict you. She shook her head slowly, denial warring with the truth. You are lying, she whispered. You are just a dirty old man. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a photograph. It was fresh, taken only an hour ago. I pressed it against the glass. Look, I commanded. Victoria looked. It was a picture of the Sterling estate, but the mansion was gone. In its place was a pile of rubble. Massive yellow bulldozers with the Blackwood Construction logo were driving over the ruins, crushing the white columns, grinding the imported tile into dust. The garden was being torn up. The earth was being turned. I tore it down, I said. This morning, I signed the order. The Sterling mansion no longer exists. Victoria let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She clawed at the glass, trying to reach the photo, trying to stop the destruction. My house, she wailed. My home. You cannot do that. It is historic. It is gone, I said. And do you know what I am going to build there? She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I am building a park, I said. A public park, open to everyone. No gates, no guards, no membership fees, just green grass and trees. And right in the center where your kitchen used to be, where you made me kneel, I am putting up a statue. A statue of who, she whispered. A statue of Silas Blackwood, I said. The man your family tried to break. He is going to stand on that hill forever, watching over his land. Victoria dropped the phone. She slid out of her chair. She fell to the floor of the visitation booth. She curled into a ball, screaming. It was a primal sound of total loss. She had lost her freedom. She had lost her money. And now she had lost her legacy. The name Sterling would be forgotten, buried under the dirt of Blackwood Park. I stood up. I hung up the phone. I looked at her one last time. She was a heap of gray misery. She was nothing. I turned and walked away. The sound of her screaming followed me down the corridor, but it sounded distant, like a ghost fading into the past. I walked out of the prison into the bright sunlight. The air tasted sweet. The debt was paid. The land was returned. My grandfather could finally rest. And I had a park to build. 6 months is a long time when you are watching bones knit back together, but it is a short time to rebuild a life from the ground up. I stood on the porch of the guest house at my coastal compound, watching my daughter walk across the grass. She did not use the wheelchair anymore. She used a cane made of polished ebony that Cyrus had carved for her, but she was on her feet. Every step was a battle. Every step was a defiance of the gravity that had tried to kill her. She winced as her left leg took her weight, but she did not stop. She was a Blackwood. We do not stop until the job is done. She reached the railing where I was standing. She was out of breath, but her eyes were bright. They no longer held the shadow of the Sterling mansion. They held the fire of a survivor. In her arms, wrapped in a blue blanket, was the reason she had fought so hard to climb out of that ravine. He is sleeping, Zoe said softly, looking down at the bundle. I looked at my grandson. He was perfect. He had dark skin and strong hands. He had the chin of a fighter. He was everything Victoria Sterling had feared. He was the future she had tried to erase. What does the birth certificate say? I asked. Zoe looked up at me. She smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had seen on her face in years. Silas, she said. Silas Lucius Blackwood. I felt a lump form in my throat. She had named him after my grandfather and me. There was no Garrett in the name. There was no Sterling. The lineage of the people who had tried to destroy us had been cut off completely. This boy would never carry the name of a coward. He would carry the name of a man who mixed concrete and waited for justice. He is heavy, I said, taking him from her. He is strong, she corrected me, just like his great-grandfather. We stood there looking at the ocean. The wind was fresh. The nightmare of the hospital room, the fear of the needles, the terror of the fire, it all felt like a distant storm that had finally blown out to sea. We were still standing, we were still here, and we were growing. But while we were healing, the world was passing judgment on those who had tried to break us. The trial had been swift, the evidence was overwhelming. The video of Victoria S. confession combined with the forensic proof of the arson and the financial fraud left no room for doubt. The jury did not need days to deliberate, they needed 2 hours. I was there for the sentencing. I sat in the front row wearing my best suit. I wanted them to see me. I wanted to be the last thing they saw before they were locked away forever. Victoria Sterling stood before the judge. She looked like a ghost. Her hair was white and unkempt. Her clothes were the drab gray of the county jail. She did not look at me. She stared at the floor, mumbling to herself. The doctors said she had suffered a psychotic break when she realized her mansion was gone. She still believed she was the Queen of Atlanta, but she was a queen without a kingdom. The judge, a stern woman who had no patience for privilege, read the sentence. Victoria Sterling, for the crimes of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and domestic terrorism, you are sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will die in custody. Victoria did not react. She just kept muttering about her tea party. Then it was Garrett S.'s turn. He cried, he begged, he tried to blame his mother. He tried to blame his addiction. He looked at me in the gallery, his eyes pleading for a mercy I did not possess. "Lucius, please," he wailed. "I am sorry. Tell them." I did not move. I did not blink. Garrett Sterling, the judge, continued. For your role in the conspiracy and the attempted murder of Zoe Blackwood in a medical facility, you are sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The gavel came down. It sounded like the closing of a coffin lid. Garrett collapsed. The marshals had to drag him out. He screamed my daughter's name until the heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off his voice forever. As I walked out of the courtroom, I passed the prosecutor S table. Mr. Vance was packing up his briefcase. He looked sharp. He looked dangerous. He had turned State S evidence against his former clients, providing the financial records that sealed their fate. In exchange, he had been granted immunity and a new job. "Congratulations, Mr. District Attorney," I said. Vance smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just eaten a whale. "Thank you, Lucius. It is amazing what a high-profile conviction can do for a career." The governor was very impressed with how I handled the Sterling corruption. "You played the game well, Vance," I said. "Just remember who taught you the rules." "I will never forget," Vance said seriously. "The Blackwood account is always safe with me." I walked out into the sun. The Sterling family was gone. They were just numbers in a federal database now. But I was not done. There was one last thing to do, one last ceremony to perform. 2 weeks later, I parked my truck on the curb of what used to be the Sterling estate. The iron gates were gone, melted down for scrap. The hedges were gone. The mansion with its white columns and its secrets had been leveled. The ground had been turned over, tilled, and replanted. It was no longer a private fortress. It was a park. There were walking paths. There were benches. There were children playing on a swing set where the garage used to be. I walked to the center of the park. It was the highest point on the hill, the exact spot where Victoria Sterling S. kitchen had stood, the spot where she had made me kneel on a hemp mat. Now there was a barbecue pit. It was made of brick and steel, big enough to roast a whole hog. Smoke was rising from it, thick and fragrant, smelling of hickory and spice. Cyrus was standing by the grill wearing an apron over his tactical gear. He was flipping ribs with a pair of long tongs. He looked happy. "Meat is ready, brother," he called out. I walked over. We had invited the whole neighborhood. People from the town, people who had been looked down upon by the Sterlings for decades, were sitting on the grass, eating and laughing. They didn't know the full story. They just knew that the old scary house was gone, and now there was a place for them. I sat down on a bench next to the grill. I held little Silas in my lap. He was sleeping, unaware that he was resting on the ruins of his enemies. I looked past the smoke. In the middle of the clearing stood a statue. It was bronze, 7 feet tall. It depicted a man in work clothes holding a shovel, looking out over the land with a quiet dignity. The plaque at the base read, simply, "Silas Blackwood." He returned. Cyrus handed me a plate of ribs. "It is a good day," he said. "It is a good day," I agreed. I looked at the statue. I looked at the children playing. I looked at my daughter, who was sitting on a blanket nearby, laughing with a handsome young doctor she had met during her physical therapy. "We took it back, Cyrus," I said. "We took it all back." Cyrus nodded, chewing on a rib. "They thought we were weeds," he said. "They thought they could cut us down. They forgot that weeds have roots that can break concrete," I said. I looked down at my grandson. He stirred in his sleep, gripping my finger with his tiny hand. He was the victory. He was the proof that we had survived. "I want you to remember this," I whispered to him, though he could not understand. "I want you to know where you come from." I looked out over the city of Atlanta. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. "Never underestimate a patient man," I said to the wind. "A loud man fights with his fists. A weak man fights with his words. But a patient man fights with time. He waits. He watches. He builds his foundation while you are sleeping. And when he finally moves, he does not just defeat you. He erases you." Victoria Sterling was a memory. Garrett was a ghost. But the Blackwoods were here. We were standing on the hill, and we were not going anywhere. I took a bite of the rib. It tasted like victory. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you think the Sterlings got what they deserved. And remember, sometimes the person mowing your lawn owns the bank that holds your mortgage. Be kind, or be ready to pay the price. The Sterlings believed power was inherited, loud, and absolute. They forgot that even the tallest towers rely on the ground beneath them. Lucius taught us that true strength isn't about showing off wealth, it's about having the discipline to wait for the right moment to strike. They saw a laborer and assumed weakness, failing to see the roots that ran deeper than their foundations. In the end, greed makes you blind, but patience makes you dangerous. Never underestimate the quiet ones, because while you are playing checkers, they are buying the board. Family isn't defined by blood, but by loyalty, and betrayal always comes with a receipt. If you believe that justice is best served, cold hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of retribution. Tell me in the comments, would you have shown mercy to Garrett, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Until next time, watch your back and never forget where you came from.